Welcome to Omni Wizard. Today's adventure: what if Harry Potter stole Thanos' Gauntlet and rewrote reality to make the heroines his? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1: The Theft of Everything. The thing about Omnipotence, Harry decided, was that it arrived with terrible manners. It did not knock. It did not wait for him to put down the cup of tea he had abandoned somewhere in another universe roughly 9 seconds and 1 cataclysm ago. It simply showed up, sat in his chest like a second heartbeat made of every heartbeat, and asked him in a voice that was not a voice what he would like the universe to be. He was going to need a moment. He did not get one. The battlefield was a ruined plain the color of old blood, and the sky above it had the particular bruised quality of a place where physics had recently lost an argument. Wakandan dropships burned in the middle distance. Something enormous and four-armed lay broken across a hill that had not been there an hour ago. The air tasted of ozone and cordite and that flat mineral nothing that Harry had come to associate, in the short and educational career of his accidental afterlife, with the proximity of the Infinity Stones. All 6 of them were on his hand. He looked down at the gauntlet, a brutal golden thing, sized for a fist 3 times his, now resized to fit him because reality had decided in the instant he closed his fingers on it, that he was the relevant variable. The stones sat in their sockets and pulsed, purple, blue, red, orange, green, yellow, each one a small sun with opinions, each one whispering. Behind him, a giant was screaming. Harry had seized the gauntlet in the half-second between Thanos lifting his hand and Thanos completing the gesture that would have erased half of everything that breathed. It had been, in the technical sense, a theft. He had apparated, except it wasn't apparition anymore. Not since he'd fallen through the veil and come out the other side somewhere the magic ran differently. He had simply decided to be in the small gap of space where the gauntlet was and Thanos' intent was not, and he had been there and he had taken it, and now the universe was waiting on him like a held breath that belonged to 10 trillion lungs. The smart move was to think, so Harry thought. He thought very fast because the stones made thinking fast extremely easy and extremely dangerous, the way a perfectly balanced razor makes shaving easy and throat cutting easier. The Mind Stone was already laying his own cognition out in front of him like a circuit diagram, helpfully highlighting the places he could improve. Remove the doubt here, trim the guilt there. You'd be so much more efficient, the diagram suggested, if you simply edited the parts of yourself that hesitate. No, Harry said aloud to no one, to the diagram, to the universe. We're not doing that. First rule, we are absolutely not doing that. The diagram dimmed, sulking. He'd had rules before he had power, which he was beginning to understand was the entire point of having rules. Rules you adopt after you become a god are not rules. They are decorations. They are the little paper umbrellas you put in a drink to pretend the drink is a holiday. The only rules that count are the ones you carried in with you, the ones that were expensive when you made them, and Harry had made his somewhere around the age of 11, kneeling on a cold stone floor, deciding that he would never become the kind of person who reached into other people's heads and rearranged the furniture to suit himself. He had not, at 11, anticipated the literal version of the temptation. 11-year-olds rarely do. Thief. The voice that hit him was not metaphorical. It came across the plain like weather. You have taken what is mine. Harry turned. Thanos was on his feet again, which was impressive, given that 2 minutes ago a woman with a sword had opened him from clavicle to hip, and a man in a red cape had been doing something complicated with mirror dimensions to the Titan's left knee. The Mad Titan stood at the bottom of the slope, vast and purple and patient, and he regarded Harry with the specific disappointment of a craftsman who has watched an apprentice pick up a tool he is not licensed to hold. It was never yours, Harry said. You found it on the floor of the universe and called it ownership. I've read your file. He hadn't technically, but the Soul Stone had. The Soul Stone had read everyone's file. It turned out that was rather its whole thing, and the difference between Harry reading it and the stone reading it on his behalf was getting blurrier by the second, which was itself a problem he filed under later. You want to murder half of creation to balance a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is wrong. Your math doesn't even work. Double the resources and a growing population eats the surplus in a generation, and a half in your back to scarcity with twice the corpses to remember it by. You didn't solve a problem, you found an excuse to be the largest thing in the room. Thanos' expression did not change, which was, Harry thought, the most honest thing about him. You speak as the young always speak, as though understanding were the same as solving. I have carried the weight of this choice across 1,000 worlds. I have buried children for it. He took a step up the slope. The ground complained. You have held the stones for the length of a single breath, and already you lecture eternity. Give them to me, little sorcerer, and I will make your ending painless. That is a mercy I extend to very few. See, that's the thing. Harry rolled his shoulders. The gauntlet hummed. Everybody who offers me a painless ending is always so generous about it. Voldemort offered me one too. Step aside, Harry. Join me, Harry. I'll make it quick, Harry. It's the verbal tick of men who have decided other people are weather. You don't negotiate with weather. You just decide whether it gets to rain on you. He lifted the gauntleted hand, and the 6 stones threw colored light across the dead plain, and somewhere behind him he heard a dozen surviving heroes go very still. I'm deciding it doesn't. He could have ended Thanos then. The thought arrived fully formed and fully equipped. A single contraction of will and the Titan would unhappen, would be retroactively deleted from the timeline so completely that no one would mourn him because no one would have had him to lose. The Reality Stone offered it. The Time Stone offered a tidier version. The Power Stone, frankly, just wanted to see something explode and wasn't picky about what, and under all of them quieter, the worst one, you could simply change his mind. Reach in. Make him want to kneel, make him love you even, make everyone love you. Wouldn't that be kinder than killing? No blood, just a small adjustment. Who would it hurt? Harry felt the shape of that temptation with great precision, the way you feel the edge of a cliff in the dark with the toes of one foot, and he stepped back from it, deliberately, the way he had stepped back from every cliff that had ever invited him to be efficient about other people's souls. No, he said again, softer, and this one wasn't for Thanos. It was for himself, and for the rule, and for the 11-year-old on the cold floor. Then he did the only thing he could think of that was both decisive and clean. He took the gauntlet off the board. Not destroyed, he wasn't an idiot, and an unmade Infinity Gauntlet was the kind of thing that left a hole in causality you could drive a dead god through. He simply folded it out of Thanos' reach, out of everyone's reach, into a pocket of space that existed orthogonal to the plane, anchored to Harry's own will and nothing else. Where his hand was, the gauntlet was. Where his hand wasn't, it didn't meaningfully exist. He'd worked out the spell logic of it in roughly the time it takes to blink, which was alarming, and he made a note to be alarmed about it properly when he had leisure. Thanos lunged. It was a good lunge. For a creature the size of a small siege engine, the Titan moved like spilled mercury, and his fist came down on the spot where Harry had been standing with enough force to turn the hilltop into a crater and the crater into a memory. Harry was no longer standing there. He was standing 6 feet to the left, hands in his pockets, watching the way a man watches a wave he has already decided not to be under. You're fast, he admitted. I'll give you that. You're genuinely fast, and you're not stupid, which is rarer in the very large. But here's your problem. He pulled his right hand from his pocket, and the gauntlet was on it again, blooming into existence around his fingers like the world's most aggressive flower. You keep treating this as a fight. It stopped being a fight the moment I picked these up. Now it's a conversation and you're losing it, and you can't tell the difference because you've spent so long being the strongest thing in every room that you forgot what it's like to simply be wrong. He raised the Time Stone's green light and undid the lunge. Not Thanos, the lunge. The motion ran backward through the Titan's body like film reversing, his fist lifting from the crater unbreaking into hill, Thanos rising and stepping back into the posture he'd held a heartbeat before, his weight rebalancing, the violence simply withdrawn from the record. And then Harry held it there, the Titan frozen at the top of a movement that was no longer permitted to complete, a fly in amber the size of a war. There, Harry said, now we can talk like people, or you can. You can talk, you've lost the limbs, temporarily. I'm not going to keep you like this, it's rude and my arm's getting tired, metaphorically. But I wanted you to feel the difference between us before you said anything else, so that whatever you say next is honest. It cost him. That was the secret nobody told you about the stones, the part Thanos had hidden behind all that purple serenity. Holding the gauntlet against a will that did not want to be held was like holding a door shut against an ocean. The ocean was patient. The ocean had been doing this since before Harry's species learned to be afraid of the dark. He felt the strain of it in his teeth, in the fillings of his soul, and he understood with the clarity that the Mind Stone kept trying to monetize, that he could not do this forever and that the universe was full of oceans. You think restraint is strength, Thanos said. He could still speak. His eyes tracked Harry with the slow contempt of geology. You think that by refusing to use the full measure of what you hold, you remain clean. You will learn. Every hand that has worn the gauntlet has worn it the same way. First the rules, then the exceptions, then the discovery that the exceptions were the rule and the rule was the lie you told yourself to feel human while you ceased to be one. I held the stones for 30 seconds. In that time I saw the heat death of 9 billion years and I did not flinch. You have held them for 90. Come back to me when you have held them for an age, little sorcerer, and tell me about your rule. It was, Harry thought, a genuinely good speech. That was the trouble with the powerful villains. They always had genuinely good speeches, and the good speeches were load-bearing, and if you weren't careful you'd find yourself nodding along to the part that flattered you and miss the part that was poison. You're half right, Harry said. which makes you more dangerous than if you were all wrong. So well done, I suppose. Yes, the rule will get harder. Yes, there will be 1,000 nights where the easy thing and the clean thing point in opposite directions, and I'll be tired, and someone I love will be dying, and the gauntlet will offer to fix it if I'll just bend the rule 1 centimeter. I know, I've done the math. I did the math before I picked these up, which is the part you keep not understanding. He let the green light fade a fraction, testing the strain, finding it survivable. But here's where you're wrong, and it's the important place. You think the rule is about staying clean. It's not. I don't care about clean. Clean is for people who want to feel good about themselves at funerals. The rule is about the other person. The rule is their mind is theirs, their love is theirs, their no is theirs, even when their no is inconvenient, even when their no is wrong, even when I could reach in with one finger and make it a yes and they'd thank me for it afterward. Especially then. That's the whole rule, Thanos. That's the only god I'm willing to be, the kind that asks. Something moved at the edge of Harry's vision. He had been aware of her for a while now. In the diffuse way the soul stone made him aware of everyone within about 4 miles. A node of grief and red light, an enormous, barely leashed power, standing very still among the wreckage where the heroes had gathered. Now she stepped forward out of the smoke, and Harry got his first clear look at the woman who would, over the next several extremely complicated weeks, ruin his composure on a near-daily basis. She was not large. That was the first thing, the thing his brain insisted on, because everything else on this battlefield had been enormous. The Titan, the dropships, the 4-armed corpse on the hill, and here was a slight figure in a red coat with her dark hair stuck to her temples by sweat and battle, and the air around her bent. That was the second thing. The air bent. Reality leaned toward her the way it leaned toward the gauntlet, and Harry felt the stones in his hand take notice of her the way one large predator notices another across a watering hole, not with hunger exactly, with recognition. You held the Mind Stone, she said. Her accent put the stress in unfamiliar places, made the sentence into something carved. It was in his head, a small motion toward the frozen Titan. It was in someone. She stopped, recalibrated. I know what it feels like when it touches a mind. I felt you decide not to. You read me, Harry said. It wasn't an accusation. He was simply noting the exits, the way you do. A little, the surface. You are very loud when you argue with yourself. The corner of her mouth did something that wasn't a smile and wasn't not one. You were going to make him love you. You saw it. The path was right there. And you stepped back. Yeah, why? Not a question the way she said it. A demand. Show me. Harry considered the honest answer, which was long and had footnotes, and the short answer, which was true but incomplete, and he decided that this was a woman who would forgive incompleteness but never dishonesty, and so he gave her the short answer and let her see he knew it was short. Because a love I reached in and installed isn't love, it's taxidermy. It looks like the thing from across the room and it's hollow when you hold it, and the moment you know what it is you can never not know. He shrugged, which undersold it, and he could tell she could tell. I've had people in my head before, not like the stone. Worse in some ways, slower. There was a man who lived in a piece of my mind for 16 years, and I spent half my life unable to tell which thoughts were mine. I know exactly what it's worth, the inside of a person. It's the only thing anyone actually owns. I'm not in the business of stealing it, not even to make myself happy, especially not to make myself happy. The bent air around her steadied. Wanda, she said after a moment. An offering, Maximoff. Harry. He looked down at the gauntlet, then back up at her. I'd shake your hand, but I'm using both of mine to hold an angry god in temporal suspension, and I get the feeling that if I let him go to be polite, you'd all have some very reasonable objections. Yes, said a dry voice from the smoke, a woman in dark tactical gear, red hair, watching him with the flat attention of someone counting his exits before he could count hers. We really would. Then everybody hold still, Harry said, because I'm about to do something stupid, and I'd like an audience of witnesses who'll remember I asked permission first. He did not, in fact, ask permission. There wasn't anyone to ask, but the line bought him 3 seconds of silence, and in 3 seconds with the gauntlet you could rebuild a solar system, so it was more than enough. He let go of Thanos, not entirely. He wasn't suicidal. But he released the time lock, and as the Titan's lunge came roaring back to life, Harry caught the motion with the space stone instead, folded the trajectory, and sent Thanos' full devastating momentum into a fold of space that opened on a dead world 4 galaxies over. A rock with no name and no life and no one to hurt, where the mad Titan landed in a crater of his own making and stood up very far away and began, Harry had no doubt, to plot his return. That'll hold him for a bit, Harry said. Not forever. Forever's harder than people think, but long enough. Then he turned to the harder problem, which was everything else. Because the battlefield was full of the almost dead and the recently dead, and the sky was still wrong, and somewhere out past the edge of the plane, half a universe was finishing the job of not quite being erased. Thanos had got partway through the gesture before Harry stole the punchline, and reality was full of frayed edges where the snap had nicked it. People were flickering. Whole worlds were stuttering between existing and not, like a candle deciding. And here was the second temptation, bigger than the first, dressed up as virtue. Fix it. Fix all of it. You have the power. Don't just undo the damage, improve it. While you're in there rewriting the wound, why not rewrite the rest? End hunger, end the wizarding wars, end death itself, and every no that has ever been said to you. You're already touching the machinery, you might as well tune it. Harry stood very still inside that one for a while. It was the longest he'd stood still since the gauntlet found his hand. "Wanda," he said, without looking away from the frayed sky, "you're still in my head a little, I can feel it. Don't stop, I want a witness for this part especially." "I am here," she said quietly. "Tell me if I cross the line, you'll know it before I do. You said you felt me decide not to with Thanos, so watch me decide again, and if I get it wrong, if I start fixing things that aren't mine to fix, you stop me. With everything you've got, I mean it. I'd rather you put me through that hill than let me become the kind of person who improves people without asking." There was a silence behind him that had several other people's silences nested inside it. Then the red-haired woman, the one counting exits, said, "He's serious." "Yes," said Wanda, "that is the frightening part." Harry almost laughed. Instead, he raised the gauntlet, and he got to work, and he did it the hard way on purpose. He could have snapped, one contraction of will, and every frayed edge would knit, every flickering soul would steady, the whole ledger balanced in an instant. But a snap was a sledgehammer, and a sledgehammer doesn't ask, and Harry had just spent 10 minutes lecturing a Titan about asking, so he was not about to win the argument by becoming the thing he'd argued against. Instead, he went edge by edge. He found each place where Thanos' half-gesture had nicked the universe, and he restored what had been there before, exactly what had been there, no more, no improvements, no editorial. A child stuttering between alive and erased on a world called Xandar. He steadied her into the life she'd been living, the imperfect mortal life with her bad lungs and her unfinished homework and her mother who drank, because that life was hers and it was not Harry's place to hand her better lungs she hadn't asked for. He did it again, and again. 10,000 times, then 10 million, then a number with no useful name, his will moving through the wounded universe like a surgeon who has decided, on principle, to use a needle where a god would use a word. It hurt. He'd expected it to hurt, and it exceeded the expectation. Each restoration was a small argument with entropy, and entropy did not concede gracefully, and the stones kept offering shortcuts. "Just snap, you absolute masochist. We can have this done before you finish wincing." And Harry kept declining because the shortcut would have meant deciding for everyone at once. And the whole point, the entire load-bearing point, was that he didn't get to decide for everyone at once. Somewhere in the middle of it, he became aware that Wanda had come to stand beside him. Not touching, just present, her red light threading quietly alongside his work, steadying the edges he was too slow to reach, catching the ones that frayed faster than he could mend. "You're helping," he said. It came out surprised. "You are doing it correctly," she said, as though that explained everything, and perhaps it did. "I have seen people fix the world. They fix it into a shape that flatters them. You are fixing it into the shape it already had." A pause, the red light flickered with something that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite hope. "I did not know that was allowed." "It's not allowed," Harry said, mending a star. "It's just chosen, different thing. Took me a while to learn the difference. I'm not sure I'm done learning it." They worked. The plane darkened toward a real night, the false bruise leaching out of the sky, the stars coming back one careful pin at a time. Behind them, the surviving heroes watched a slight man in a stolen gauntlet and a slighter woman in a red coat rebuild a corner of creation by hand. And not one of them spoke, because there are some things you do not interrupt even to ask what the hell is happening. When it was done, when the last frayed edge was knit and the universe held its own weight again without Harry's hand under it, he let the gauntlet's light fade to embers, and he sat down. Just sat abruptly on a rock that 2 hours ago had been part of a Titan siege line because his legs had registered the bill that his pride had been deferring. "You should eat something," Wanda said. "Power on an empty stomach makes bad decisions. That's the most practical thing anyone said to me since I got here." He looked up at her. The starlight had softened her, or maybe that was just the absence of the fight. "Wanda, I need you to keep doing what you just did. Not the fixing, the watching. You were in my head when I made the choice, and you'll be the first to know if I ever start making it wrong. I'm going to be holding the most dangerous object in several universes, and the thing about holding it is that it lies to you in your own voice, and I would very much like at least one person around who can tell the difference between my voice and the gauntlets. I can't make you. I won't make you, obviously, that's the whole, but I'm asking." She studied him for a long moment, and he let her, and he kept his surface thoughts honest because he knew she could see them, and because dishonesty in front of a mind reader is just stupidity with extra steps. "You are asking me to be the one who stops you," she said slowly. "To stand close enough to a man holding everything that I would be the first thing he unmade if he chose wrong. You understand what you're asking?" "Yeah," Harry said. "I'm asking you to trust me less than anyone else in the universe, and to stand closer to me than anyone else in the universe at the same time. It's a terrible ask. I'm aware it's a terrible ask. I'm making it anyway because the people who'd find it an easy ask are exactly the people I wouldn't want standing there." Something shifted in her face, not a smile. He was already learning she rationed those, but a kind of arrest, as though a sentence she'd been bracing to hear all her life had finally been said by someone who meant it. "Show me," she said, "that you mean it, not now, over time. Words are cheap, and I have heard every cheap word a powerful man can say to a woman he wants near him." Her chin lifted. "But I will watch. I will stand where you ask. And the day you reach into someone, anyone, and take what is not yours, I will not put you through a hill, sorcerer. I will put you through the concept of a hill. Do we understand each other?" "Completely," Harry said, and meant it, and let her see he meant it. The red-haired woman picked her way across the rubble toward them, and now that the fighting was over, Harry could see her properly. Economical, alert, a person assembled entirely out of contingency plans. She stopped at a careful distance, close enough to talk, far enough to run, and looked at the gauntlet on his hand the way a locksmith looks at a vault. "Natasha Romanoff," she said. "I'm the one who's going to ask you all the questions Wanda's too polite to ask, and a few she is." Her eyes flicked to the frozen then released sky, the rebuilt stars, the absence of a titan. "You undid the snap. Without taking anything for yourself. No throne, no demands, no terms. In my experience, people who hold that much power and ask for nothing are either saints or they're playing a longer game than I can see. Which is it? Honestly." Harry got to his feet, his legs held this time. "I don't know yet. I've had the power for about a quarter of an hour. Ask me again when the novelty wears off and the temptations get personal, because right now they're abstract. Fix the universe, don't fix the universe, and abstract temptations are easy. It's the specific ones that get you, the dying friend, the person you want who doesn't want you back. That's where men like me find out what their rules are actually worth." He met her eyes, which was its own small act of courage. They were not comfortable eyes to meet. "So number not a saint. Saints don't notice the temptation. I notice it constantly. I'm just choosing so far not to take it. Ask me every day. Please, out loud, it helps." Natasha looked at him for a long moment, counting something, weighing something, filing something in whatever ledger she kept behind that flat green gaze. Then she nodded once, a small concession that he understood was worth more than other people's effusions. "Every day," she agreed, out loud. "Starting tomorrow, because tonight you look like a man who'd fall over if I asked him anything harder than his name." She glanced at Wanda. "He needs sleep and 3,000 calories. So do you. The world's still here, the Titan's a galaxy away, and the rest of the questions can survive until morning." The rest of them came down off the ridge then, the soldier with the shield, the man in the iron suit nursing a wound he was pretending not to nurse, the cape-wearing wizard who'd been doing things to Thanos' knee and who now regarded Harry with the wary professional interest of one practitioner sizing up another from a wholly different tradition. They had questions too. Of course they had questions. Harry had questions, and the questions were standing on his hand glowing in 6 colors. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the stars were back where they belonged, every single one restored to exactly the imperfect place it had occupied before a Titan tried to improve the universe by having it. Tonight, Harry Potter sat on a rock at the edge of a battlefield in a universe that was not his own, holding more power than any single will had ever held, and the only thing he had used it for was to put everything back the way the people who lived there had left it. Wanda settled onto the rock beside him, not quite touching, her red coat dark against the recovering dark. "You did not fix me," she said quietly after a while. "You fixed Xander and the child with the bad lungs and 10 million others. You walked past a great deal of grief tonight, sorcerer. Mine was standing right next to you the whole time. You did not so much as glance at it." "I know," Harry said. "Your grief is yours. I don't touch what's yours without asking, and you didn't ask." He looked at her and he let the question be real, let it have weight, because he could feel the shape of the loss in her like a missing tooth, and he was not going to pretend he couldn't. "Do you want to talk about it? Not fix. I'm not offering fix. I'm offering to listen, which is a smaller thing and I think a better one, but only if you want. The offer expires the second you'd rather I shut up." She was quiet for a long time. The stars wheeled. Somewhere across the plain, Natasha was already organizing the survivors with the brisk competence of a woman who found grief easier to manage when it was given tasks. "Not tonight," Wanda said finally. "But that you offered to listen instead of to mend." She turned the words over, testing their weight. The way Harry was learning, she tested everything. No one has offered me the small thing before. They always reach for the large one. The large one is easier. It lets them leave. Her eyes found his in the dark and held. Ask me again tomorrow, and the day after, the way Natasha will ask you. We will see, sorcerer, what your offers are worth when they have had time to go stale and you make them anyway. Deal, Harry said. They moved the survivors to a Wakandan outpost an hour before dawn, a low building of dark stone and quiet technology set into a hillside, the kind of place built by people who understood that wars produce people who need a roof and a wall and a door that locks from the inside. Harry walked the last stretch on his own 2 feet, because he had a private theory that a man who lets the gauntlet carry him everywhere stops being a man who walks and becomes a man who is carried. And the distinction would matter later, in some night he couldn't yet see, when walking was the harder and therefore the correct thing to do. The gauntlet whispered the whole way. It had not stopped whispering since he picked it up. He was starting to understand the cadence of it, not words exactly, but a steady low pressure of possibility, a current that ran always in the direction of more. Heal the limp in the soldier's stride. Smooth the burn scarring the iron suit man kept flexing his hand against. Reach into the grief radiating off half the room and turn the dial down, just a little, just enough, who would object to a little less pain in the world. Harry walked through it the way you walk through a crowd of people trying to sell you things, politely, attentively, buying nothing. Inside, someone had found food. Harry ate it without tasting it, which the Soul Stone informed him was a waste, and which he ignored, because the Soul Stone had opinions about everything and most of them were correct in a way that made them exhausting. Natasha sat down across from him with 2 mugs of something hot and slid one over. You said to ask every day. It's after midnight, so technically it's a new day. I'm asking. That's lawyering, Harry said. I respect it. Go on. How did you get here? She wrapped her hands around her mug but didn't drink, and he noted that she'd taken the seat with the wall behind her and the door in her sightline, and he noted that she'd noted him noting it, and they had a brief silent agreement that they were both that kind of person and could stop performing it for each other. You're not from anywhere we have a file on. You talk about wizards and a man who lived in your head and a war that isn't ours. You came out of nowhere at the exact moment we needed someone to come out of nowhere. I don't believe in that kind of timing, so where did you fall from? A curtain, Harry said. She waited. There's a thing in my world, was a thing. An archway with a curtain hanging in it in a room full of, you'd call them artifacts, dangerous ones. People who fall through the curtain don't come back. Everyone knows that. It's the one fact about the thing that everyone agrees on. He turned the mug a quarter turn, not drinking either. 2 people not drinking at each other. Someone I loved fell through it when I was 15, and I spent 12 years becoming the kind of person who could survive going in after him, and then I went in after him. And the curtain, it turns out, isn't a way of dying. It's a door. It's just a door that nobody ever walked back through because nobody ever survived being on the other side long enough to find the handle. He shrugged. I survived. I found the handle. The handle led out here 3 weeks ago into a universe with different rules and bigger problems, and, as of tonight, a quite alarming jewelry situation. Did you find him, the person you went in after? It was, Harry thought, a surgically precise question, and he understood that she'd asked it because the answer would tell her something about him that no question about power ever could. No, he said. He wasn't there. The door doesn't go where the people who fall through it go. I worked that out somewhere around week 2. I came through a curtain looking for my godfather, and what I found was a war and a titan and a choice. He finally drank because the alternative was letting the silence get sentimental. And sentiment in front of Natasha Romanoff felt like undressing in front of a sniper. So if you're asking whether I had a plan, I'm improvising at a cosmic scale with equipment I stole 40 minutes ago. If that frightens you, good, it frightens me. The day it stops frightening me is the day you should worry. Across the room, Wanda had folded herself into a chair by the window, and she was watching the conversation the way she watched everything, sidelong, partial, present. Harry felt the light brush of her attention against the edge of his mind, the gentlest possible pressure, checking not his thoughts but the shape of them, the honesty of them. He left the door open for her. It seemed only fair, given what he'd asked. He's telling the truth, Wanda said to Natasha without being asked. About the curtain, about the godfather, about the fear. A pause. He is also leaving things out, large things, but they are his to leave out and none of them are lies. That'll do for tonight, Natasha said and stood, and Harry understood he'd passed something, not a final test. There would be no final test. That was rather the point of a woman like Natasha, but a first gate, the kind you have to pass before you're allowed to attempt the second. Sleep, both of you. The questions get harder tomorrow, and you'll want to be smart for them. She paused at the door, and her eyes went briefly to the gauntlet dormant now and dark on Harry's hand. For what it's worth, she said, I've watched a lot of people get handed power they didn't earn. Most of them I had to plan around, a few I had to put down. A beat. You're the first one I've watched spend the whole night putting things back exactly the way he found them. I don't trust it yet, but I noticed it. Don't make me regret noticing. She left. Harry sat with that for a while, in the quiet, in the company of a woman by the window who had agreed to be the one who stopped him, and another, already gone, who had agreed to be the one who asked. Two of the most dangerous people he'd met in any universe, and he'd recruited them not by offering them anything, not by reshaping a single neuron, but by being, for one night, exactly what he claimed to be. It would get harder. He knew it would get harder. That was the whole bargain. And above them, far past the rebuilt stars, in the cold place where things without bodies keep their attention, something very old turned very slowly toward the small warm spot on the map where a mortal had picked up the totality of creation and used it of all the impossible things to mind his manners. It did not approve. It would in time have a great deal to say about that, but not tonight. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The first rule. Harry woke to the smell of coffee and the sensation of being watched by 11 security cameras, 4 telepathic wards, 1 anxious wizard from the Greenwich Village tradition, and the dormant attention of 6 infinity stones that wanted to know if today was the day he'd let them off the leash. It was not going to be that day. He established this before he opened his eyes, the way some men establish that they will not check their phone before breakfast, and for roughly the same reason. Because the small refusals are practice for the large ones, and a man who can't decline a minor temptation has no business pretending he'll decline a cosmic one. You're awake, said Natasha from the chair by the door. She had not been there when he fell asleep. She had a tablet, a cup of coffee she'd already finished, and the specific stillness of a person who had been sitting in the dark watching a sleeping demigod for some hours and considered it a reasonable use of her night. It's morning. So my question out loud like you asked. Did you change anyone's mind while you slept? Number. He sat up. The cot was Wakandan and far too comfortable for a war. I dreamed about a Quidditch match I lost when I was 13, which the Gauntlet kept offering to let me re-win, and I told it no, and then it sulked, which you should know is a thing the most powerful object in the universe does. It sulks. It's extraordinarily petty for something that could end galaxies. He rubbed his face. Anything else move while I was out? Half the planet's governments want you dead, contained, or recruited in roughly equal measure, and frequently the same government wants all three. She turned the tablet so he could see a map gone red with notifications. There's a man named Ross who's already drafted a resolution to designate you a weapon of mass destruction, which to be fair you are. There are 6 religions that have decided you're a sign and can't agree of what. And there's an energy signature inbound from low orbit that lit up every sensor we have about 40 minutes ago and is currently parked above us deciding whether to come down or come down hard. That sounds like a person. That sounds like Carol, said Natasha, and something almost wry moved through her voice. You'll want to be standing for that one. He was getting dressed when Wanda came in, and he made a point of not reacting to the fact that she'd clearly slept as little as Natasha, that there was a tightness around her eyes that the night had drawn and not erased. She had a plate of food in her hands, which she set down in front of him without comment, and he understood that this was the Maximoff version of a question. Feeding a thing is how you find out whether it's a monster, and he ate, and let her watch him eat, and did not perform. You slept, she said. Truly slept, I felt it. Most men holding what you hold would not dare close their eyes. They would lie awake guarding it. Her head tilted, a fraction. You were not guarding it, you were dreaming about a ball game. Quidditch isn't a ball game, it's 3 ball games happening simultaneously and competitively to the same people, but yes. He pushed the empty plate away. I slept because the alternative is becoming the kind of person who can't. Vigilance is a drug, Wanda. It feels like virtue. You stay up guarding the precious thing and you tell yourself it's responsibility, and what's actually happening is you're training your nervous system to believe that the world ends if you ever relax your grip. And a person who believes the world ends if he relaxes his grip is exactly the person who, eventually, will do something monstrous to keep his grip. So I sleep on purpose, it's a discipline. He paused. Also, I was genuinely tired, don't overeat it. Sometimes a nap is just a nap. The corner of her mouth did the not smile again. He was beginning to catalog its variants. They convened in a long, low room with a view of the Wakandan dawn, and it was, Harry thought, the strangest committee meeting he'd ever attended, and he'd attended Order of the Phoenix meetings where the average participant had survived at least one war crime. The soldier with the shield, Rogers, sat very straight and radiated a moral seriousness that Harry found both admirable and slightly exhausting, the way you find a very good person exhausting when you're hungover. The Iron Suit man, Stark, had built himself a holographic display overnight and was using it to pretend he wasn't terrified. The cape-wearing wizard, Strange, which was either a name or a remarkably honest job description, watched Harry with the particular vigilance of a man whose entire discipline was about preventing exactly this. "Let's start with the obvious," Stark said. "You have the Infinity Gauntlet, the actual one, all 6 stones. The thing we lost a war and several friends trying to keep out of a genocidal grape's hands. And your pitch to us is, what, trust you, because so far the resume is random British wizard who fell out of a curtain and immediately acquired the means to unmake the cosmos. You'll forgive me if I've seen this movie and it does not end with a parade." "I wouldn't trust me either," Harry said. "I want to be clear about that up front, because everything I'm about to say will sound like the things an untrustworthy person says, and I'd rather you hold that suspicion the whole time than relax it and feel betrayed later. Don't trust me. Trust the structure I'm going to build that makes my trustworthiness irrelevant." He looked around the room. "Here's the thing none of you have asked yet, and it's the only question that matters. Why haven't I already won?" Silence. "Think about it. I've had the gauntlet for, 11 hours. With it I could have rewritten this conversation before it happened. I could have made every government on Earth adore me. I could have reached into each of your heads while you slept and adjusted you into loyal lieutenants, and you would have woken up this morning certain you'd always been on my side, and you'd never have known, and this is the important part, there is no one in this universe who could have stopped me. Strange, you couldn't have. Wanda, you'd have felt it, but only because I told you to watch. If I wanted you not to feel it, you wouldn't have. So," he spread his hands, "why are we having a meeting? Why is there an argument to win? Why did I leave all of you in possession of your own opinions, when your opinions are the single largest threat to me in the cosmos?" "Because you want something from us that compulsion can't give you," said Natasha quietly. It wasn't a guess. She arrived at it the way she arrived at everything, by elimination. "Mind control gets you obedient. It doesn't get you what's the thing you can't take?" "Witnesses," Harry said. "Real ones, people whose yes means something because their no was available the whole time." He let that sit. "I'm holding a thing that lies to me in my own voice. I told Wanda that last night. The gauntlet doesn't tempt you with evil. Evil's easy to refuse. It tempts you with efficiency and with kindness and with the perfectly reasonable next step. And the only defense against a thing that argues in your own voice is other voices. Voices you didn't write. The second I make you agree with me, I've cut my own lifeline. So no, I'm not going to make you trust me. I need you suspicious. I'm going to need you suspicious for the rest of my life, and the day all of you finally relax and decide I'm a good man is the day I'm in the most danger I've ever been in, because that's the day I've stopped having anyone left to stop me." Strange spoke for the first time. His voice was careful, the voice of a man diffusing something. "The time stone was my charge. I've looked down 14 million futures. In every single one where someone holds all 6 stones, it ends badly as insufficient. It ends with the holder becoming something that is no longer the holder. The stones don't corrupt by changing what you want. They corrupt by giving you everything you want until wanting itself burns out, and what's left is a thing that acts without wanting, which is the closest functional definition of a god and also of a catastrophe." He leaned forward. "You're describing safeguards. Witnesses, suspicion, a rule. I've seen men describe safeguards in 4 million of those futures. The safeguards are part of how it happens. They're the story the holder tells himself on the way down." "I know," Harry said. "You know. I read it off you while you were talking. Not your mind, your face, your discipline, the fact that you've clearly run this exact scenario in your head until it's worn a groove. You think I'm a doomed timeline that hasn't finished collapsing yet, and you might be right." Harry met his eyes. "Here's what I'd ask you to consider, though, before you decide I'm the 14 million in first. In all those futures you watched, how many of the holders started by giving the power back? Not keeping it responsibly, not wielding it wisely, giving it away on purpose before the wanting burned out. How many?" Strange was quiet. "None," he admitted. "Then you haven't seen my future yet. You've seen the futures of men who wanted to keep it. I don't." Harry stood. "I'm going to prove that to you today in a way that costs me something, because words are cheap and Wanda's already told me she's heard every cheap word a powerful man can say. So let's talk about the people Thanos killed before I got here. Not the snap, I caught most of the snap, the ones before. Vision, the ones on the ship, the half of Titan's defenders. The people your war already cost you that my arriving 11 hours too late didn't save." He looked at Wanda and he kept it gentle and he kept it true. "I can bring them back, cleanly. The actual person, not a copy, not a puppet. The stones can reach where they went and bring the real thread back into the weave. I've checked, it's possible. It's even, by the standards of what I'm holding, easy." The room had gone very still. He'd expected that. He'd counted on it even, which made what he said next more important, not less. And I'm not going to do it unless they'd consent to it, which most of them can't because they're dead, and the dead are notoriously bad at returning calls. So here's my actual offer, and I want you to notice how much smaller and worse it is than the offer you're hoping for. He turned to Wanda fully now. Vision, you loved him. He died twice in one day. You killed him to keep the stone from Thanos, and then Thanos turned back time and killed him again to take it anyway. I felt the shape of that in you last night, and I have been thinking about almost nothing else since, which is unprofessional of me, and I'm telling you anyway. I can bring him back, the real Vision, but I won't do it because you're grieving and I want to be the man who fixed it. I'll only do it if it's what he would choose, and the only way to know that is to ask him, and the only way to ask him is to reach far enough into death to put the question, which the soul stone can do, and then this is the part that matters, to abide by his answer even if his answer breaks your heart. Even if he says number, even if he says, I died for a reason, let me stay dead, and you have to live with that. Those are the terms. That's the whole offer. You want me to ask him? Wanda did not answer right away. That was Harry would think later. The moment he understood he was in real trouble with this woman, not the power of her, not the grief, but the fact that she sat with a question that any other grieving person would have answered in a half-second scream of yes, and she weighed it because she had understood the trap inside the kindness faster than he'd finished laying it out. You are asking, she said slowly, whether I love him enough to let him refuse me. Yeah, that is a cruel offer, sorcerer. It's the only kind I'm willing to make. The kind action would be to just bring him back and let you both sort it out and bask in your gratitude. But the kind action treats his death as mine to overrule. And it is. It's his even now, even gone. Harry's voice didn't rise. He learned long ago that the things that matter most should be said most quietly. I will not bring a single soul back into this world against its will, Wanda. Not for you, not even for you. And I want you to see me refuse to, because that refusal is the only evidence I can give you that I'll refuse the larger version when it comes for me dressed as your happiness. Stark said into the silence. Okay, that's actually deeply unsettling, and I think also the most ethical thing anyone's ever said in this room. And I've been in this room with Captain America. He pointed at Harry. I still don't trust you, but I want it noted that you just turned down the chance to be everyone's favorite person and chose instead to be the guy who makes a grieving woman do moral philosophy at 8 in the morning, and that is perversely reassuring. Ask him, Wanda said. The room turned. Ask Vision, she said again, and her chin was up and her eyes were dry by force, and Harry could feel the cost of it radiating off her like heat off a stone. You are right that it is his to choose. I have spent so long deciding things for the people I love. I unmade an entire town once, did Stark tell you that? I built a life out of grief and put real people in it as furniture and called it love, and it took losing it to understand what I had done. I will not do it again, even by proxy, even through you. So ask him, and whatever he answers, her voice did not break. It bent the way she bent everything and held. Whatever he answers, I will abide by it, do it where I can see. Harry raised the gauntlet. He did it slowly, openly, narrating with his free hand the way a surgeon narrates for the gallery, because he wanted no part of this to happen in the dark. The orange light of the soul stone came up first, the gentlest of them, he was learning, and the most dangerous, because gentleness is how the worst things get past the guards. He reached, not with force but with a question, down the long cold thread where a synthezoid's consciousness had unraveled, and he found the place where Vision still, in the strange, persistent grammar of the soul, was, and he asked. It took less than a second, and it aged Harry a year. The dead, it turned out, were not eager to discuss their preferences. But Vision had been in life a being made partly of the Mind Stone, and so a piece of him understood the Gauntlet's grammar natively, and answered in kind, and the answer came back into the room not as words but as a certainty that Harry then had the unenviable job of translating out loud while a woman who loved the answerer watched his face for lies. He says, Harry stopped, started again because he owed her precision. He says thank you for asking. He says that's the part that matters, that you asked, that you didn't just reach in and take. He says, Harry's jaw worked. He says he'll come back, not because death frightens him, it doesn't. He says he'll come back because the reason he died was to keep the stone from doing harm, and the stone is now in the hands of someone who's refusing to do harm with it, which means his death has, in a sense he finds mathematically satisfying, already done its work. The danger he died to prevent is being prevented by other means, so the death is no longer load-bearing, so he's free to choose, and he chooses you. A pause. He also says, and I'm quoting because I refuse to be responsible for this sentence, that he has observed your taste in subsequent acquaintances, that's me, he means me, and reserves judgment. Wanda made a sound that was a laugh strangled in the cradle by a sob, and Harry brought Vision back, the real one. He was very careful about that, more careful than he'd been about anything since the gauntlet found his hand, not a copy, not a memory animated into a convincing shape, but the actual continuous thread of the person, reeled back into a body, the stones rebuilt molecule by molecule to the exact specification of the man who died, including the flaws, including the mortality, including the capacity to die again, because a Vision who couldn't die would not be Vision, he'd be a monument. And Harry was not in the business of replacing people with monuments of themselves. The synthezoid opened his eyes, sat up on the conjured surface, looked around the room with the mild interest of a man returning from a long trip and said, "Ah, I appear to be alive, and someone is holding all 6 stones and has not used them to do anything horrifying. I confess I did not predict this configuration." His gaze found Wanda. Whatever passed between them then Harry looked away from, because some restorations are not yours to witness even when you're the one performing them. He sat down. The soul stone's reach had taken more than he'd let show. He let Natasha see that it had taken something, because letting her see the cost was itself a kind of evidence, and evidence was the only currency he had with these people. That, Stark said after a while in a voice that had lost most of its armor, is the single most powerful argument you could have made, and I notice you made it by giving something away instead of taking something. I'm revising. I'm not done revising, but I'm revising. The sky chose that moment to come down hard. The orbital energy signature that Natasha had flagged stopped deciding and committed, and it committed through the ceiling, not literally, the Wakandan ceiling held, but the pressure of an arrival that bright announced itself in every sensor and every spine. Harry felt the gauntlet wake up properly for the first time since Thanos, the stones turning their attention outward in a way they hadn't bothered to for the planet's combined militaries. They'd recognized Wanda as a peer. They recognized whatever was coming through the roof as something else, not a peer, but a genuine question. The woman who walked in was lit from inside. That was the only honest way to describe her. Carol Danvers came into the room trailing the last of an atmosphere she just punched through, gold and crackling. And she did not stop at the polite distance everyone else had learned to keep from the man with the gauntlet. She walked right up to Harry, close enough to start a fight, and looked at the gauntlet, and then looked at him with the flat, assessing contempt of someone who'd flown across a galaxy on a bad rumor, and found it worse in person. "So you're the new guy," she said. "The one who picked up the gun everyone's been dying over and decided to play house with the Avengers instead of, I don't know, conquering anything. I've met your type, usually right before they conquer something. Power that big doesn't sit still. It's like a reactor, it either does work or it melts down. There's no third setting where it just sits there being humble." She tipped her head. "So what's your output, wizard? What are you actually running under the modesty?" "Right now, mostly a headache." Harry didn't stand. Standing would have been a concession, and she'd have read it as one. "You're Carol. You hit like a small sun, and you've spent enough time as the biggest thing in the room that you assume bigness has only one grammar, which is conquest. I get it. It's a reasonable prior. It's also wrong, and you're going to be annoyed about how wrong it is, so let's get the annoyance over with." He looked up at her. "Ask me what you actually came to ask, not the reactor metaphor, the real one. You flew here at, what, several times light speed because something about the situation scared you enough to come check it in person. So check it. What's the question?" Carol's jaw tightened, and Harry, watching, thought, there it is, the thing under the swagger. "She came because she's afraid of exactly one thing, and it walked through a roof to find out if it's standing in this room." "Fine," she said. "You want the real one? Here's the real one." The gold dimmed a fraction. She was, he realized, choosing to be a person instead of a weapon, which from her was the equivalent of someone else getting on their knees. "I've held power people couldn't push back against. Not your level, nowhere near, but enough that when I say no, planets listen, and when I make a mistake, planets pay for it. And there's a thing that happens. You stop hearing number, not because you're cruel, because the universe stops saying it to you. You get so strong that everyone around you starts agreeing with you preemptively, flinching toward your opinion. And one day you look up and you can't remember the last time someone told you that you were wrong and meant it, and you realize you've been alone at the top of your own strength for years and called it leadership." She was very still now, the swagger gone. "You've got 6 stones. You've got more of that than anyone's ever had. So my question, wizard, my real one, is who tells you no? Because if the answer is nobody, then it doesn't matter how nice you are this morning. You're already gone, you just haven't noticed the room emptying." Harry was quiet for a moment because she'd walked, swaggering, directly into the center of the only thing he was actually afraid of, and named it better than he could have. "Her," he said, and nodded at Wanda. "She's agreed to be the one who tells me no, up to and including putting me through a hill. Her, Natasha, she asks me every morning out loud whether I changed anyone overnight, and she'll keep asking until one of us is dead. Him, strange. He thinks I'm a doomed timeline, and he's watching for the collapse, which makes him very useful, because a man waiting for you to fail pays a kind of attention that your friends never will." He held Carol's gaze. "And now, if you're willing, you. Because you just told me for free the exact failure mode I'm most afraid of, which means you understand it from the inside, which means you're the rarest kind of person I could possibly recruit. Someone who's been a little bit of what I might become and clawed back from it. I don't want your loyalty, Carol. Loyalty's worthless to me. I could manufacture loyalty with a thought and it would poison me. I want your number. Will you give it to me? out loud often and meant. Carol stared at him. That's the worst recruitment pitch I've ever heard, she said. Come be the person who's mean to me forever. It's the only honest one I've got. You know I came here half hoping you'd be a villain, she said. It's cleaner, you punch villains. You don't have to have a conversation with them about whether they're going to accidentally become a god. The gold flickered, almost rueful. Fine, you want my no, you've got it. And I'll tell you right now, wizard, the first no, for free, so you know I mean it. She leaned down close. You're enjoying this. The witnessing, the asking, the whole noble restraint thing. There's a part of you that likes how good it makes you look to give power away. And that part, that's the part that becomes the monster, not the part that wants to conquer. The part that wants to be admired for not conquering. Watch that one, because I'm going to be watching it and I have very good eyes. She straightened and the room let out a breath it had been holding, and Harry found that he was almost smiling, which he hadn't expected, which annoyed him in a way he'd have to examine later. That, he said, was an excellent number, thank you. Do it again whenever you like. Oh, I will. Natasha, from the corner, said dryly, I think that's the first time I've seen someone flirt by threatening to monitor a man for signs of divine corruption, but you two seem to have an understanding, so I'm going to let it stand and pretend I didn't notice. There's nothing to notice, said Harry and Carol at the same time in the same flat tone, and then both registered the simultaneity and decided, separately and identically, not to acknowledge it. The meeting broke up into the logistics of a planet trying to absorb the fact that one of its problems had become its largest unknown. Harry spent the afternoon doing the unglamorous work of being a power that refused to act like one, declining politely the 17 governments who wanted him to fix their borders, fix their enemies, fix their dissidents, declining less politely the one government that suggested he might fix a particular journalist, and undoing carefully and with consent obtained where consent was obtainable, the specific harms of the war that the people who'd suffered them actually wanted undone. And leaving alone the ones they wanted to keep, because grief is sometimes load-bearing, and a man who removes another person's grief without asking has stolen something even when it looks like charity. It was Wanda who found him at the end of it, on a high terrace, watching a sun he hadn't made set over a country he was trying very hard not to rule. Vision is adjusting, she said, coming to stand beside him, not touching. He was learning the precise width of the gap she kept, and learning that the gap meant something, that it was held open on purpose, the way a door is held open on purpose. He is grateful and confused, and he says you did it correctly, which from him is large. He does not say that, he audits, he found nothing to audit. A pause. I wish to tell you that I felt every part of it when you reached for him. I was in your mind the whole time as you asked. And there was a moment when you held his consciousness in the stone, when you could have simply brought him back the way I would have wanted, grateful and uncomplicated in mine. There was a moment when the gauntlet offered you that. I felt it offer. It always offers, Harry said. It's very persistent. You did not take it. She turned to look at him, and the dying light did something to her face that he declined to narrate to himself, because narrating it felt like a kind of taking. You had the chance to make me love you, sorcerer, today, with my own dead husband as the instrument. You could have given him back to me wrong, just slightly wrong, devoted to you, grateful to you, and I would have loved you for it and never known. It was right there. I felt how close it was. I know exactly how close it was, Harry said. It's the closest I've come. I'd like it noted, since we're being honest, that it wasn't easy. The gauntlet's smart. It knew that you were the lever. It offered me you, specifically dressed up as kindness, and for about a tenth of a second it was a real argument and not just noise. He kept his eyes on the sun. I told you the specific temptations are the ones that get you. That was the first specific one. There'll be worse. Wanda was quiet for a long moment. When the worst ones come, she said, I will be standing where you asked, and I will tell you no, the way Carol promised, the way Natasha asks. But I want you to know, and here her voice did the thing again, bent and held, that I am not standing here only as your warden sorcerer. I agreed to be the one who stops you. I did not agree to be only that. A person can be the one who would stop you, and also the one who hopes she never has to. Those are not the same job. Do not confuse them. Do not flatten me into the role, the way the powerful always flatten the people near them into roles. Her chin lifted. I am a person. I will be no one's furniture. Not even yours, especially not yours. Understood, Harry said, and meant it, and let her see he meant it, and did not reach for her, because the gap she held open was hers, and he had made exactly one rule, and the whole point of the rule was the days it was hard. Far above the terrace, past the atmosphere, past the orbit where Carol had punched through, in the cold registry where endings are filed, a presence that had been merely curious the night before finished its accounting and reached a verdict. A mortal held the totality. A mortal had, twice now, declined to use it the way every prior holder had used it. And the thing about a being whose entire dominion is the inevitability of certain outcomes is that it does not take kindly to a mortal making those outcomes optional. Death turned her attention fully toward the small warm spot on the map and began, without hurry, because she of all things had no need to hurry, to make arrangements. Harry felt the verdict land before he understood it. He was alone by then, the terrace dark, Wanda gone in to sit with a husband she was relearning, and the change came through the gauntlet as a drop in temperature that had nothing to do with weather. The stones noticed it first. The soul stone, which spent most of its time cataloging the living, went still in the manner of a deer that has heard a branch break. The time stone offered him unbidden a glimpse of several thousand near futures, and in an unsettling fraction of them the glimpse simply stopped, cut off clean, the way a film stops when the reel runs out. "You've drawn attention," said Strange, who had come up the stairs without sound, in the way of men trained to enter rooms before the rooms know they're being entered. "I felt it too, something turned toward us, something that doesn't have a body and doesn't need one and has been around longer than the concept of being around." "Death," Harry said. He didn't phrase it as a question. The soul stone had told him the name the way a barometer tells you about a storm, not in words, in pressure. Not the event, the entity, the one Thanos was courting. He wasn't balancing a spreadsheet, was he? Not really. Underneath all the spreadsheet talk, he was trying to impress a girl. "You're taking this very calmly for a man who's just been noticed by the personification of mortality." "I take everything calmly, Strange. It's a character flaw." "My friends used to find it infuriating." Harry watched the dark where the futures kept ending. "Here's what I don't understand yet, and I'd like to before it becomes a problem." "Why now?" "I've held the stones for a day. I undid a near genocide. I brought one synthezoid back from the dead. By the standards of cosmic accounting, that's barely a rounding error. Death sees more people die in an average second than I've touched in total. So why does a single mortal with good manners merit the personal attention of an abstract older than time?" Strange was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice had the flatness of a man stating a thing he'd rather not have understood. "Because you're not killing anyone, that's the offense. Thanos killed half the universe and Death loved him for it. He fed her, he was useful, he was a mortal who served the necessary order. You took the same gauntlet and you're using it to make death optional. You asked a dead man whether he'd like to come back, you'll ask others. Word travels even there. You're not a murderer she has to punish. You're worse, you're a precedent. You're the mortal who proved the door swings both ways, and if that precedent stands, then every grief in creation becomes a negotiation, and the one thing that has always been non-negotiable becomes a thing people argue with." He almost smiled, and there was no humor in it. "You haven't threatened her power, you've threatened her authority. Beings like that will forgive almost anything except the suggestion that they can be reasoned with." Harry absorbed that. "So my options," he said slowly, "are to stop bringing people back, which means abandoning the one use of this thing I actually believe in, or to keep doing it and pick a fight with the concept of mortality. Those appear to be your options, yes?" "Good," Harry said, and Strange looked at him sharply because it was not the response of a sane man. "No, I mean it. Good, because a fight I can have. A fight has rules, even when the other side wrote them. The thing I was afraid of was an enemy I couldn't refuse, something inside me, the Gauntlet's own voice, the part Carol warned me about. An external enemy, even an infinite one, is a relief by comparison. I know how to be in a war, I grew up in one." He flexed the gauntleted hand, and the 6 stones threw their colors briefly across the dark terrace. "What I don't know how to be is the kind of man who lets a cosmic clerk tell him whose grief is allowed. So if Death wants to file a complaint about my manners, she can come and make it in person. I'll even ask her permission first. It's only polite." There was a sound behind them, half a laugh. Carol had come up onto the terrace, gold banked low, arms folded, and she'd clearly heard the last of it. "Just so I'm tracking," she said. "Day 1, you stole the most dangerous object in the universe. Day 2, you've decided to start a war with Death herself on principle because she hurt your sense of fairness. And somewhere in there you turned down conquering the planet to attend a committee meeting." She tipped her head. "I came back up here to tell you a second number, but honestly, Wizard, I think the more useful thing might be a yes. A yes, when she comes, and she will. Things like that always come eventually on their own schedule, which is the most annoying thing about them." Carol crossed to the rail and stood at it near him, not the careful distance the others kept, because she'd never in her life kept a careful distance from anything that frightened her. She flew at it. "You're going to want someone in that room who stared down a thing bigger than herself and not blinked. You've got the woman who tells you no, and the spy who asks you questions, and the wizard who's waiting for you to fall. What you don't have is someone who's been the strongest thing in the sky and learned the hard way that strong isn't the same as right. You're going to need that person when an immortal tells you that you've broken the rules, because she'll be persuasive. They always are, and you'll need someone next to you who knows exactly how persuasive the view from the top can be." She glanced sideways at him, and the gold flickered, almost warm. "So yes, I'll stand in that room, don't read anything into it." "Wouldn't dream of it," Harry said. "You're reading something into it." I'm reading absolutely nothing into it. I'm a model of restraint. I've been told it's my most attractive and most dangerous quality, sometimes by the same person within the same hour. Carol snorted, and for a moment the two of them simply stood at the rail of a borrowed country, two people who'd each held more power than was good for anyone, watching a night sky that had recently been at war and would shortly be at war again, and saying nothing, which was its own kind of conversation. Below them, somewhere in the building, Wanda Maximoff sat with the husband Harry had returned to her on terms most men would never have dared offer, and felt through the thread she'd left in Harry's mind. The cold thing turned toward them all, and did not look away from it, because she had decided quietly that afternoon, with a certainty that surprised her, that she was done being the woman who let the worst things happen to the people she chose. She had chosen the sorcerer. Not the way the powerful flattered themselves they were chosen, all at once and forever. She had chosen to watch him and to stop him, and she admitted only to herself in the privacy of a mind no one else could read tonight, to hope she never had to. That was the state of things on the second day. A mortal who would not conquer, three women who had agreed to keep him honest and were each, separately, beginning to suspect the agreement had a second floor under it, and a presence in the cold above who had decided that a man with good manners and infinite power was the most dangerous thing she had encountered in the long catalogue of her work. Voldemort in another universe entirely, in a forest in a country Harry no longer lived in, stirred in whatever passed for his rest and felt very faintly that an old scar he could no longer reach had begun, for reasons he could not name, to ache. He dismissed it. He had always been very good at dismissing the things that should have frightened him. It was in the end the only consistent thing about him. Harry, who could feel that too, who could feel everything now if he let himself, chose not to look. The Dark Lord of his childhood had become, against all the odds of his youth, a footnote, a small dark man in a small dark wood, a problem he'd outgrown the way you outgrow a fear of the cupboard under the stairs. There were larger doors to be afraid of now. He de-walked through one of them on purpose. He intended to walk through the rest the same way, eyes open, hands visible, asking first. The stones whispered as they always whispered in the direction of more. He let them whisper. And he went on his own 2 feet to get some sleep, because tomorrow the questions would be harder and he intended to be smart for them. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, What the Witch Saw. The thing about reading minds, Wanda had learned across a lifetime of doing it, was that it ruined you for ordinary trust. When you can see the gap between what people say and what they mean, you stop being able to take any kindness at face value, because you've watched too many kindnesses with knives folded inside them. She had stopped, years ago, believing in offers. Every offer she'd ever been handed had come with a hook she could see and a second hook she couldn't, and she'd learned to wait for the second hook the way a sailor learns to wait for the second wave. Harry Potter kept handing her offers with no hooks in them at all, and it was driving her quietly out of her mind. She found him on the 4th morning in a courtyard doing something to a small dead bird, not reviving it. She watched from the colonnade for a while before he noticed her, or before he let her think he hadn't noticed her. She could never tell with him. His surface thoughts were a performance he put on for her benefit, and his deep ones he kept folded somewhere. Even the Mind Stone seemed reluctant to go. He was crouched over a sparrow that had broken itself against a window, and he was not bringing it back. He was just looking at it, turning it gently with one finger, the gauntlet dark and quiet on his other hand. "You could," she said, crossing to him, "easily. You brought back a synthezoid. A bird is nothing. A bird is not nothing, that's the whole problem." He didn't look up. "I can feel it, you know where it went. It's right there, the soul stone's practically pointing at it. And I can't ask a sparrow for consent. It doesn't have the kind of mind that can answer the question, so I have to guess. And the moment I start guessing on behalf of things that can't answer, I've appointed myself the arbiter of which deaths count, and that's exactly the job I refuse to take." He set the bird down, arranged its wing, so it stays dead. "A sparrow falls and I have all the power in the universe, and I let it stay fallen, because the alternative is becoming the thing that decides. It's a stupid hill. I'm aware it's a stupid hill. I plant my flag on the stupid hills on purpose, because the smart hills you can rationalize your way off of." Wanda sat down on the courtyard stones beside him, which surprised them both. "I came to ask you about my brother," she said. He went still in the particular way he did when something mattered, not tensing, the opposite, a kind of deliberate settling, like a man making sure his hands were empty before a conversation. "Pietro," he said, "I felt him in you the first night, under vision. Older grief, scarred over. You don't pick at it the way you pick at the new one. It's the kind you've decided to live with. He died protecting a child in Sokovia. He ran in front of it does not matter what, bullets, a great many bullets, very fast, which was funny because fast was the only thing he ever was, the one power he had, and the universe killed him with the thing he was best at." She looked at the dead sparrow. I have had years with it. I built a whole false world once to get away from it. Did anyone tell you? A town. I made a town and put a version of him in it, and a version of Vision and a life. And I held it together with my grief and the suffering of 2,000 real people who I trapped inside my fantasy and forced to play their parts. I did not know I was doing it. That is the kindest thing I can say about myself. I did not know. And then I knew, and I had to take it apart with everyone watching and let them all go back to being themselves instead of being my comfort. Her voice did not waver because she had told this story to herself enough times to file the edges off it. So when you offer to bring back the dead, sorcerer, understand that you are not offering me a gift. You are offering me the exact poison I nearly drowned in. The difference between us is that I had to learn I was doing wrong. You knew from the start. I do not understand how you knew from the start. Harry was quiet for a moment. Because I read the books where people didn't, he said finally. That's the unglamorous answer. I had a collection growing up, stories about people who got power and what it did to them. And the through line, every time, the thing that turned the hero into the horror was the moment they decided they knew better than the person they were helping. Every single time. The road to every hell I ever read about was paved with someone deciding they understood what another person needed more than that person did. He picked up the sparrow again, cradled it. I didn't figure out the rule, Wanda, I stole it. From 100 cautionary tales written by people smarter than me who'd watched it go wrong. The only original thing I've done is take them seriously when the Gauntlet started whispering that this time would be different. And Pietro, she said, could you? Yes. The same way as Vision, I'd reach for him, ask him, and abide by his answer. Including if his answer is number. He turned to look at her now, fully. But I want to tell you something before you decide whether to ask, because it's the thing I'd want told to me. Pietro's death was different from Vision's. Vision died to prevent a specific harm, and that harm is now prevented by other means, which freed him to choose. Pietro died protecting a child who lived. His death already did its work, and the work can't be undone. The child grew up, the world moved, the sacrifice landed. When I reach for him and ask, he's not going to be weighing, should I undo a death whose purpose has expired? He's going to be weighing, should I unmake a sacrifice that meant something to come back to a sister who spent years learning to carry it? Those are very different questions. I don't know what he'll say, I genuinely don't. And I need you to be ready for either answer, because if you ask me to ask him while you're still hoping for one specific reply, then I'm not really asking him, I'm using him to manage your hope, and that's the taxidermy thing again. Wanda sat with that. The courtyard was warm, somewhere a fountain ran. She had not, she realized, expected to be talked out of her own grief by the one man in the universe who could have simply indulged it. And the strangeness of that, of a god declining to give her what she wanted, in order to protect her from getting it the wrong way, sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't place as burden or gift. You are the most frustrating person I have ever met, she said, and I have met Tony Stark. I'll take that, it's high praise from a tough panel. A pause, and then more quietly, what do you want to do? I want, she stopped. Started again because he had taught her in 4 days that the first version of a sentence was usually the lie and the second was usually the truth. I want to not need to ask. I think that is the real answer. I think if I ask, it is because I have not finished carrying him, and the carrying is, it is mine. It is the last thing of his I have. If you bring him back and he stays, then I lose the grief, and the grief is the shape he left in me, and I do not know who I am in the shape that does not have him missing from it. Her hands had curled. She uncurled them deliberately. Does that make sense? It is insane. I am turning down my brother's life. It makes complete sense, Harry said. You're not turning down his life. You're declining to overrule his death until you're sure the wanting is his return and not your relief. That's not insane. That's the opposite. That's you having learned the exact lesson the town taught you and applying it even when it costs you the thing you most like to have. He set the sparrow down again, final this time. For what it's worth, and it's not worth much, it's just one man's read, I don't think you need to ask. I think you've already had the conversation with him, the real one, the one that matters, the one that happens inside you over years. The stone can't improve on that, it can only interrupt it. Then I will not ask, Wanda said. Not today, perhaps not ever, but I wanted to know the door was there even if I do not walk through it. There is a relief in knowing a door is unlocked that has nothing to do with wanting to open it. There is, Harry agreed. It's the difference between a wall and a choice. Same outcome, completely different to live next to. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something she had not planned, which was to lean her shoulder briefly against his, there on the warm courtyard stones, a contact of perhaps 3 seconds that she initiated and ended on her own terms, in the gap she'd been holding open on her side of it. He did not move toward her. He did not move away. He simply let it be the thing she'd decided it would be, which was, she understood as she straightened the entire point, that with this man even a moment of closeness was a thing she got to author start to finish with no second hook hidden in it. That, she said, is a dangerous habit you have, sorcerer. Letting people decide things, it will make them very attached to you. Probably an unintended consequence, Harry said, in a tone that made it clear he'd intended nothing of the kind and that they both knew it, and Wanda found that the not smile had escaped onto her face without her permission, which had been happening with alarming frequency. It was 3 days after that, 3 days of the strange domestic interval in which the most powerful being in several universes did committee work and declined to rule planets, that the sky opened sideways and the universe sent its first formal complaint. Harry felt it as a summons that did not ask. One moment he was in the Wakandan commissary, losing an argument with Stark about whether the gauntlet could or should be used to generate a really excellent cup of coffee. Harry's position was that using infinity to improve coffee was the precise kind of small corruption that ended in large ones. Stark's position was that Harry was a coward who feared good espresso, and the next moment the room was gone and the planet was gone. And Harry was standing in a place that had no floor and no sky and no up and was nonetheless, unmistakably, a courtroom. He was not alone. Wanda was beside him, which should not have been possible. She'd been across the base, and her presence there told him two things at once. That whatever had summoned him had reached into his immediate vicinity and taken what was nearest, and that it considered her relevant to the proceedings, which was its own kind of warning. Above them, around them, comprising the place rather than standing in it, was a figure with 3 faces, and the 3 faces were not arranged like a head, they were arranged like a verdict, and when it spoke, the speech was the architecture. "The tribunal is convened," said the living tribunal, and the words were not heard so much as already true. "A mortal holds the infinity SDONES. This is not in itself a crime. The crime, if crime EXISDS, is the use. We are gathered to determine whether the use is permitted." "I have a lot of questions about jurisdiction," Harry said, "but I'm guessing this is that kind of court." "It is not." "Right, then I'll skip to the part where I ask who's actually pressing the charges because a tribunal doesn't convene itself," someone complained. "And I've got a fairly short list of cosmic abstracts I've annoyed in the last week, so I'm going to guess." He looked into the floorless dark and found, as he'd suspected, that he was not the only mortal-shaped thing present, that there was a fourth presence, robed in an absence so total it read as a color, and it had the patient, attentive, faintly amused quality of a thing that had been waiting a very long time and could wait longer. "Hello, you'd be the one I've been keeping awake. The reason all my futures keep cutting off mid-reel." "I am what you think I am," said Death, and her voice was not cold. That was the surprise of it, the thing the stories never got right. It was warm. It was the warmest thing in the courtroom. It was the warmth of a thing that loved its work and had never once been refused. "And you have been very rude, little wizard. You have taken what I am owed and called it manners." A second presence resolved beside her, vaster and different, a silhouette filled with stars, the contents of all that is regarding the proceedings with the mild interest of an ocean regarding a single wave. Eternity. And a third, infinite in the orthogonal direction, the dark between the stars given a posture. Infinity. The full court of the abstracts convened over a man who had declined to commit a genocide. "You died," Death said to Harry, conversationally. "Did you know that, once, in your own world? You walked into a forest and let a dark man kill you. And for a moment you were mine, and then you chose to come back, and I let you, because that choice was beautiful and rare, and it fed something in me that hunger cannot." The warmth in her voice did not change. "I have always had a fondness for you, little wizard. That is why this grieves me, because you have taken my fondness for permission. You think that because I let you return, I will let you open the door for others. You think death has become a thing you may discuss." "I think death has always been a thing that should have been discussable," Harry said, "and that the only reason it wasn't is that nobody until now has had both the means and the manners. Yeah, I'll cop to that charge. I think you've run an absolute monopoly on the most important decision any conscious thing ever faces, and you've run it without consultation. And I think a single mortal with infinite power and a strict policy of asking first is exactly the thing that should frighten you, because I'm not here to kill you or replace you. I'm here to make you negotiate, and things like you would so much rather be feared than negotiated with." "Be careful," said the tribunal, and the warning was for Harry, and it was in its way almost kind. "You argue with principles, not with persons. Death is not persuaded. Death is only ever delayd. The tribunal asks a simpler question. A mortal holding totality is an instability. Every prior holder has in time collapsed into tyranny or ascension, and either outcome renders the SDONES a threat to the structure of the real. You claim you will not. The tribunal has heard this claim before. Why should the claim be believed? It shouldn't, Harry said. I keep telling people that and nobody listens. Don't believe me, believe her. He gestured at Wanda. The whole court turned its attention, and the weight of that attention was a physical thing, a pressure that should have flattened any mortal mind. Wanda stood inside it without flinching, and Harry felt, through the thread she still kept in him, the cost of not flinching, and respected it more than he respected most things. "This is Wanda Maximoff," Harry said. "She has agreed to be the one who stops me. She can read my mind, the surface of it, the part that matters, the part where the choices get made before the hands move. She's been in my head every day since I picked up the gauntlet. She watched me decline to bring her own brother back rather than risk doing it for the wrong reason. She watched me refuse to mind control a Titan. She's the single most qualified witness in this or any court to the question you're actually asking, which is, will he claim restraint? Anyone claims restraint. Is the restraint real? So don't ask me, ask her." And he looked at Wanda, and he made the next part a genuine offer, not a maneuver, because in front of three abstracts who could see the inside of any lie, there was no profit in maneuvering. "Wanda, you don't have to. This isn't a thing I asked you for. If you want to stand there and say nothing, or say you don't trust me, or say you think I'm a doomed timeline like Strange does, then say it. I will not hold a single atom of it against you. Your testimony is yours, even here, especially here." Wanda looked at him. Then she looked at the court, at death's terrible warmth, at the tribunal's three-faced patience, at eternity's star-filled indifference. And she did the thing she had decided in the courtyard with her shoulder against his for 3 seconds that she was done not doing. She chose out loud in front of the powers that had spent her whole life deciding her fate without her. "I have been inside the minds of the powerful," she said, and her accent carved each word into the floorless dark. "I was a weapon before I was a woman. I was made and used and lied to by men who told me they knew what I needed. I know the inside of a manipulator the way you know the inside of your own hand. I have felt the precise texture of a man deciding to use me." She lifted her chin. "And I have been inside this one's mind every day, and he does not have that texture. When the gauntlet offers him my love, and it offers constantly, I have felt it offer. There is a thing in him that recoils before he even decides to refuse. It is not strategy I would feel. It is older than strategy. It is built into him the way fear of falling is built into a child." She held the court's attention without bending under it. "You ask why the claim should be believed. I will tell you why. Because I, who have every reason to distrust him, who is harmed by exactly his kind of power in exactly the way you fear, have chosen to stand beside him. Not as his warden, as his witness and his." She did not soften the word, she let it land with its full weight in front of the abstracts. "As the woman who has decided freely, knowing everything, that he is worth standing beside. You will not get a more hostile witness than me. And I am for him. Weigh that, tribunal, weigh what it costs a woman like me to say it." The court was silent. It was death who broke it, and the warmth in her voice had changed, gone thoughtful, gone, and this was the genuinely frightening part, gone interested. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, little wizard, you did not bring a witness. You brought a heart, and it loves you." The robed absence seemed almost to smile. "Do you understand what you have done? You have shown me the lever. You stand here insisting you will never reach into a mind to take love. And you have just demonstrated in open court that you do not need to. They give it to you freely, which is so much worse for my purposes, because a love compelled I could break. A love chosen," the warmth curled around the words like a hand around a throat. "A love chosen I can use." And Harry understood a half-second too late that he had won the argument and lost something he didn't have a name for yet, and that the war he'd told Strange he knew how to fight had just revealed that it would be fought not over his power, but over the people who had of their own free will come to stand inside its reach. "The tribunal will deliberate," said the tribunal. "The mortal may go for now. Know that you are watched, sorcerer, by older eyes than any you have evaded, and know that the abstract you have most offended does not deliberate. She only ever decides." The courtroom folded. The floorless dark became a commissary and a half-finished argument about coffee in stark mid-sentence in the ordinary impossible world. Harry stood very still for a moment, the gauntlet cold on his hand, Wanda beside him with her chin still up and her hand still steady. "You shouldn't have said it," he said quietly. The last part in front of her, she heard it. "She's going to use it." "I know," Wanda said. "I felt her hear it." She turned to face him, and there was no fear in her, only the carved certainty he was learning was the truest thing about her. "I said it anyway. Because the alternative was to let them think I stood beside you out of duty, and that would have been a lie, and you have spent a week teaching me that the lies we tell to stay safe are the most expensive lies of all." Her hand found his, the human one, not the gauntlet, and held it briefly on her terms, in the gap she kept and had just now in front of the abstracts of the universe chosen to narrow. Let her use it, let her come. "I have spent my whole life having my choices made for me by powers that did not ask. I have finally made one of my own in the open where it cost me something. I will not unmake it to be safe, not even from death." Harry looked at their joined hands and then at her, and he did not say any of the 7 things the gauntlet helpfully offered him to say. each one optimized to make her feel exactly what he wanted her to feel. "Okay," he said instead, which was the only honest word he had. "Okay, then we do it the hard way, together, eyes open." "Eyes open," Wanda agreed, and for the length of one held moment, in a commissary on a planet that wasn't his, a man who could have rewritten the heart of every living thing held the hand of a woman who had given hers freely, and chose, again, the smaller and harder and truer thing, which was simply to let her. News of the trial reached the rest of the base the way news of a thing that has no footage tends to reach people, as a wrongness in the air that everyone felt and no one could photograph. Stark had been mid-sentence when Harry and Wanda vanished and mid-sentence when they returned, and the gap in between had been by every instrument in the room exactly 0 seconds long, which Stark found more upsetting than a long absence would have been. "You blinked," he said, "both of you, out and back. 0 elapsed time, and yet you came back looking like you'd been somewhere. I've built my whole life on the principle that I can measure things, and you just made a liar out of every sensor in this building. So I'm going to need you to explain in small words where you went and who's now angry at us, because I assume someone is. Someone's always newly angry at us, it's the one constant." "We went to court," Harry said, "cosmic court. The living tribunal, which is, imagine a judge who is also the law and also the courtroom and also the concept of judgment, with 3 faces, none of which you want to see disappointed. And the prosecution, who didn't technically speak but didn't have to, was death, the entity, the one Thanos was trying to impress." He pulled out a chair, sat, and the ordinary act of sitting in a plastic chair after standing in a floorless absence steadied him in a way nothing else could have. "Good news, we're not under arrest. Bad news, I think I just taught Death the precise method by which she's going to come at me, and I did it by winning the argument, which is the most me thing that's ever happened." Carol had come in halfway through, and now she leaned against the counter with her arms folded and the gold bank behind her eyes. "Walk me through it, the method. If something that old just learned a new way to hurt us, I want to know its shape before it shows up wearing it." So Harry told them. He told it plainly without softening the part that implicated him, because softening it would have been a kind of lie, and he'd built his entire fragile credibility on not telling those. He told them that he'd brought Wanda as a witness to his restraint, and that her testimony had been true and freely given and devastatingly effective, and that Death had listened to a hostile witness choose to stand beside him and had drawn from it exactly the wrong lesson, that the way to break a man who won't compel love is to threaten the people who love him without being compelled. "So she'll come for us," Carol said, flat, not a question. "The ones who chose you, that's the play. She can't make you a tyrant, so she'll make loving you lethal and watch you decide whether your precious rule is worth a single one of our lives." "That's the play," Harry agreed. Carol was quiet for a moment, and then she did something that surprised him. She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a fighter pilot who has just been told the odds and found them insulting. "She picked the wrong leverage, you know that, right? Every villain who's ever tried to get to me through the people I care about has made the same mistake. They think the people are my weakness. They're my reason. There's a difference, and it's the difference that gets the villain killed." She pushed off the counter. "I've stood in front of a dying sun and not blinked, wizard. I'm not going to start blinking because a lady in a robe thinks my mortality is a pressure point. Let her come, I've been looking for something my size." "She's not your size," Harry said. "I need you to hear that, because the thing about Carol Danvers is that she's never met an opponent she couldn't outfly, and Death is not an opponent you outfly. She's not above you, she's underneath everything. She's the floor. You can't punch a floor, then I'll find the part of her that has a face and punch that." "That," said Natasha, who had been listening from the doorway in her customary posture of having been there longer than anyone noticed, "is either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've heard this week, and I genuinely can't tell which is roughly how I feel about everyone in this room." She came in, took the seat with the wall behind it, and looked at Harry with the flat green attention that he'd come to understand was her version of affection. "My question. You've been gone 7 minutes of real time and 0 minutes of court time, so I'll allow a delay, but I'm collecting now. Did you change anyone's mind in that courtroom? Did you reach into Wanda to make her testify? Did you so much as nudge the tribunal?" "No," Harry said. "No, and I wanted on the record that the not nudging was hard because the tribunal was deliberating my continued existence, and I had 6 stones that could have argued the point more persuasively than my mouth. I sat there and let 3 abstracts decide my fate without cheating. Ask Wanda, she was in my head the whole time." "He did not cheat," Wanda confirmed. "He wanted to. I felt him want to. He did not." "Wanting to and not doing it is the whole ball game," Natasha said. "Saints don't want to. I trust the ones who want to and don't a lot more than I'd ever trust a saint." She filed something away behind her eyes. "Okay. You passed. Tomorrow's question will be worse. They always are." That night Harry didn't sleep, which broke his own rule, and he knew it broke his own rule, and he made an exception exactly once and noted the exception so it wouldn't become a habit. because the difference between a man and a tyrant was sometimes just the honesty of his exception tracking. He sat on the terrace where Carol had found him on the second night, and he turned the problem over and over and found no clean edge to grip. Wanda came out near midnight. She did not announce herself. She simply arrived in the gap she kept, close but not touching, and stood at the rail and let the silence do the first part of the talking, which was a thing she'd learned to do that almost no one else in his life had ever mastered. "You are blaming yourself," she said eventually. "For the trial, for showing her the lever. I can feel it from here. You do not even have to let me in. It comes off you like heat." "I handed Death a weapon," Harry said. "I walked you into a courtroom to make a point, and the point became the weapon. If she comes for you, if she comes for any of you, it'll be because I was clever in front of the wrong audience. Listen to yourself." Wanda turned to face him, and there was something fierce in her now, the carved certainty gone hot at its edges. "You are doing the thing you warned everyone about. You are deciding on my behalf that my choice to testify was a mistake you made instead of a choice I made. You are taking my agency and folding it into your guilt so that the brave thing I did becomes a thing that was done to me by your cleverness." Her hand came up, not quite touching his chest, hovering. "Do not do that. Do not rob me of my own courage by blaming yourself for it. I chose to speak. I knew Death was listening. I am not a child you walked into traffic. I am a woman who looked at the traffic and stepped into it on purpose, and if she comes for me, it will be because I chose you in the open, and that choice is mine, and I will not have you steal it back by calling it your fault." Harry looked at her for a long moment. "You're right," he said. That's exactly the failure mode. Carol warned me about the part of me that wants to be admired for restraint. She didn't warn me about the part that wants to own everyone's risks so I can feel responsible enough to deserve the power. Same root, though. Both of them are me deciding I'm the main character of other people's choices." He let out a breath. "Thank you. For the number that was a good one. You're all getting alarmingly good at the nose. We have a motivated teacher." The knot smile, then it faded and something more careful took its place, and she let her hand finish the motion it had started, resting flat against his chest over the second heartbeat that the gauntlet had put there, the one made of every heartbeat. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it as a man and not as the keeper of a rule. Can you do that for one question?" "I can try. The rule's load-bearing, Wanda. I don't take it off like a coat." "I am not asking you to take it off. I am asking you to answer underneath it." Her eyes held his. "When the gauntlet offers you my love, when it shows you the path to simply reaching in and making me yours, what stops you is the rule. Yes, I have felt the rule stop you, but I want to know what is underneath the rule. Because a rule that has nothing underneath it is just a wall, and walls fall down. So underneath the rule, why do you not want the version of me that you could make? Tell me the true thing, sorcerer. The one even the Mind Stone is reluctant to look at." Harry was quiet for so long that the fountain below them ran through 3 full cycles of its sound. "Because I had it," he said finally, "not love. But the thing, the made thing, the version of a person that exists to make you feel a certain way. I grew up with people who performed affection at me when they had to and withheld it when they didn't, and I learned to read the performance, and I promised myself I would never be on the other end of it, never be the one running the performance on someone else. And then I got the power to make the performance real. To reach into a person and make the affection genuine all the way down, no seams, no tells, a love I could trust completely because I wrote it myself." He looked at her hand on his chest. "And that's the horror of it, Wanda. That's the part underneath the rule. It's not that the made love would be fake. The gauntlet can make it real. It's that I would always know I wrote it. Every time you smiled at me, I know which line of code produced the smile. Every time you chose me, I know I'd removed your ability to choose otherwise. I would have a perfect love, and I would be completely alone inside it, more alone than I've ever been, because the one thing I could never have is the thing I'd have destroyed to get there, a person who could have walked away and didn't." His voice was very low now. "I don't want the version of you I could make because I'd know I made it, and knowing that would poison every good thing it gave me forever, and I would have spent infinite power to purchase the loneliest room in the universe. That's underneath the rule. The rule is just the part I can say in front of other people." Wanda did not speak for a while. When she did, her voice had gone quiet and certain and entirely her own. "Then here is a thing you cannot make, and so you may have it, because I am giving it and not you taking it." She rose onto the balls of her feet, and she kissed him once briefly, deliberately, beginning and ending it herself, in the gap she had kept and chosen in this moment to close. And then she settled back onto her heels and looked at him with her chin up and her hands steady and dared him with her whole carved face to make it into anything other than what it was, which was a free woman's free choice, given to the one man in creation who would never have stolen it. "That," she said, "is mine to give. Not the gauntlet S to write. Remember the difference. I will be very angry if you ever forget it." "I'll remember," Harry said, and his voice wasn't quite steady, and he let it not be, because steadiness in that moment would have been its own kind of lie. Wanda, I'm not going to pretend I don't want this. That'd be dishonest and you feel the dishonesty. I want it. I've wanted it since you told a Titan he'd lost the argument before the fight started. But I need you to know that I'll never push it past the speed you set, and the speed is yours, all of it, start to finish. If you want to stop here for a year, we stop here for a year. If you want to stop here forever, we stop here forever, and I'll be glad of the forever. You set the pace. Every step, that's not a sacrifice I'm making. It's the only version of this I'd actually want. I know, she said, that is why I closed the gap. She stepped back, restoring it on her terms, and the restoring was its own kind of intimacy, a thing offered and then carefully held, a door she'd shown him she could open and chose for tonight to leave at rest. Slowly, sorcerer, we have, I think, a war with the concept of mortality to survive first. It would be poor planning to fall in love and then be killed by an abstract. Let us do the surviving, and then we will see what speed I set. Deal, Harry said for the third time that week, and meant it more each time. Above them in the cold registry, Death watched the two small warm figures on the terrace and felt the choice pass between them, freely given, impossible to compel, and she understood with the certainty of her ancient office that she had been right to be afraid. A love like that could not be broken from the inside. There were no seams to work a knife into. It would have to be broken from the outside with loss, with the oldest tool she owned. She had, fortunately, an instrument already in motion. A purple instrument, exiled to a dead world 4 galaxies over, nursing a grievance the exact size of a stolen gauntlet, who wanted the stones back for reasons of his own and would not need to be compelled either, only pointed. Death did not compel Thanos. She never had. She had only ever gently, warmly, in the voice that was the warmest thing in any room, told him where to look. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The Titan's arithmetic. Thanos came back on the 11th day, and he came back the way weather comes back, not as a surprise, but as a thing the barometer had been promising for hours before it broke. Harry felt the approach first as a wrongness in the space stone, a fold being worked at from the far side. Someone 4 galaxies away who'd spent 11 days teaching himself the grammar of a dead world's leftover technology and had finally assembled enough of it to punch a hole homeward. He could have closed the hole. That was the first thing the gauntlet offered: seal the fold, leave the Titan stranded on his nameless rock for the rest of a very long life. It would have been clean. It would have been safe. It would also have been a man with infinite power deciding to imprison an enemy forever rather than face him. And Harry had learned, watching 1,000 cautionary tales, that the prisons you build to avoid your problems are where your problems go to become your masters. So he let the fold open. He's coming, Harry said to the team assembled around Stark's holographic table in the hours before dawn. Thanos. He's worked out how to get back, and he's not coming for the planet. He's coming for these. He raised the gauntlet a few inches. Which means he's coming for me. Which means wherever I am when he arrives is where the fight happens. Which means I'm not going to be anywhere near any of you when it does. Like hell, said Carol. Carol, we're not doing the thing where the powerful guy goes off alone to spare everyone, because the powerful guy who goes off alone is exactly the guy who comes back changed. And you've spent 11 days telling us the whole point is that you don't come back changed. You want witnesses. Witness this. She was already lit, already gold at the edges. We fight him together, or you've already lost the argument you keep saying you're trying to win. It was, Harry reflected, extremely annoying to be out-argued by his own logic in the mouth of a woman who'd learned it 11 days ago. Fine, he said, but there's someone else coming through that fold, and I need all of you to hold your fire until I say otherwise, because she's the variable that decides whether this is a war or a conversation. She, said Natasha. Gamora, Harry said, his daughter, the one he murdered to get the Soul Stone the first time before any of this. The stone remembers her. It's been humming since the fold started opening. She's coming back through with him, and I don't yet know if she's coming as his weapon or as something he doesn't understand he's bringing. The fold opened over the Wakandan plain at dawn, and Thanos stepped through it, and he had rebuilt himself in 11 days into something leaner and colder and more deliberate than the brute who'd lunged at Harry on the first night. He'd had time to think. That was the danger of him, the brute you could manage, but a Thanos who'd had 11 days alone with his grievance had refined it into a philosophy with edges. And behind him, green-skinned, blade-bright, moving with the economy of a person who'd learned long ago that wasted motion was a thing fathers punished, came Gamora. She was not chained. That was the first thing Harry's eye reported, and it reported it as a warning rather than a comfort, because a daughter walking free behind the father who'd killed her was a more complicated thing than a daughter dragged. She walked at a careful distance from Thanos. Harry recognized the distance. It was the same width Wanda kept, the gap held open on purpose, and her eyes went first not to Harry, not to the gauntlet, but to the team arrayed behind him, counting them the way Natasha counted exits, 2 predators recognizing each other's grammar across a battlefield. You let the fold open, Thanos said. You could have sealed me away. You did not. Sentiment or arrogance. Neither. Hygiene. Harry stepped forward alone ahead of the team because some conversations have to be had in the open where everyone can see your hands. I don't build prisons to avoid conversations. You wanted the stones back. Here they are, let's have the conversation you crossed 4 galaxies to have, and let's have it honestly in front of witnesses the way the important ones should be had. There is no conversation. Thanos' voice was almost gentle now, which was worse. There is only the correction of an error. You took what does not belong to a child. You have spent 11 days using the stones to, what, restore, mend, ask permission. The contempt in the last word could have stripped paint. You have held omnipotence for 11 days and you have used it to make yourself smaller. It is the most profound waste I have witnessed in a life measured in genocides. I am here to end the waste. See, this is the thing I've been wanting to ask you. Harry kept walking slow, hands visible. You keep calling restraint a waste, as though the only valid use of power is to spend it. But you spent yours, Thanos. You spent every bit of it on a single afternoon in a single gesture, and what did you buy? Half a universe of corpses and a girl you had to murder to even reach the trigger. You call my restraint waste. I call your expenditure the most expensive nothing in cosmic history. You had infinity and you bought grief. At least I'm still holding mine. Something moved in Thanos' face, not anger. Grief, actually, the old buried kind, and his eyes went for half a second to the green woman keeping her careful distance. Do not, he said very quietly, speak to me of what I bought. Then let's not speak in the abstract. Harry stopped 20 feet from the Titan, close enough now that the conversation was real. Let's talk about her, Gamora. You killed her for the Soul Stone. The stone demands a soul you love, and you loved her, so you threw her off a cliff and called it sacrifice and told yourself the universe required it. And here she is, walking behind you, free, not chained. So either you brought her back somehow, or she was never as dead as the cliff suggested, or, and this is my actual guess, you found a way to pull a version of her out of the Soul Stone's memory, and you've been telling yourself it's really her, because the alternative is admitting that the thing you bought with infinity was a daughter-shaped hole you'll spend eternity trying to fill with a copy. He looked past Thanos to Gamora directly, and he made his voice gentle, and he made it a real question. Which is it? You're standing right there, you get to answer for yourself. Are you his, or are you here? Gamora's eyes came to him. I am neither, she said, and her voice had the flat economy of a blade laid on a table. I am a version. He's right that I should be dead. I remember the cliff, I remember his hands, I remember the bargain. And I am also right that I am here walking thinking with a knife and a grievance of my own. He pulled me from the stone's memory because he could not bear the whole. He calls me his daughter. I call myself a question he has not had the courage to ask. Her gaze did not waver. And the question is the one you just asked, sorcerer, which is why I am answering you and not him. Am I a person, or am I a thing he made to feel less alone? He has never dared to find out. He keeps me close and never asks, because if he asked and the answer was a thing, he would have to admit what he did to the real one, so he does not ask, he simply has me, the way men like him have things. The plane was silent, and you, Gamora said, turning the full weight of her attention onto Harry now, hold a stone that could answer the question for me. The Soul Stone knows what I am. You could look, you could tell me right now whether I am a woman or a memory wearing a woman's face. He never looked because he was afraid of the answer. Are you afraid? No, Harry said, but I'm not going to look. Gamora's eyes narrowed. Why not? You have the means. You have you could end my uncertainty in an instant. Is that not a kindness? It's the opposite of a kindness, Harry said, and I'll tell you exactly why, because you've earned a real answer and not a comforting one. If I look into the Soul Stone and pronounce a verdict on what you are, then I've become the authority on your reality. I've made myself the man who gets to tell you whether you're a person, and that's a power no one should have over another being, ever, no matter how gently they use it. You asking me to look is you trying to hand me the exact thing your father took from you, the right to define you from the outside. I won't take it, not even to relieve you. Because the question, am I a person, isn't answered by an external scan. It's answered by you living as one and deciding the living counts. You're standing there making choices. You chose to answer me instead of him. You chose the careful distance. You chose the knife and the grievance. Those are choices, Gamora. Memories don't make choices. They replay. You're not replaying. So as far as I'm concerned, the question's already answered, and it was answered by you, and I'm not going to insult the answer by redeciding it with a magic rock. Something happened in Gamora's face that Harry would not have presumed to name, because naming it felt like the same theft he just refused. But the knife, which had been loose in her hand, angled fractionally away from him and toward the Titan she'd walked in behind. Daughter, said Thanos, and there was warning in it, and under the warning, for the first time, fear. He is manipulating you. It is what the powerful do. He tells you what you wish to hear so that you will turn the knife where he wants it turned. He told me he would not look, Gamora said, not turning. You never offered to look. You did not even offer not to. You simply decided I was yours and never spoke of it again. He has spoken to me as a person for the length of one conversation, Father, and it is more than you have managed in all the time since you pulled me out of the stone. Now she did turn, and the blade caught the dawn. That is not manipulation. That is the comparison you cannot survive. You brought me here to be your weapon against the man who stole the gauntlet. And he has spent 90 seconds reminding me that I am not a weapon, which is the one thing you spent my entire existence making sure I would forget. Thanos struck. He struck at Harry, not Gamora. Harry noted that even in his rage the Titan couldn't quite bring himself to strike the daughter-shaped question, and the blow came across the plane with the speed of the first night and the refinement of 11 days' practice. And this time Harry did not freeze it, because freezing it had been a parlor trick to make a point, and the point was made. This time he fought. And here the Baroque machinery of the stones unfolded in its full and terrible glory, because a battle between a Titan who had studied the gauntlet for a lifetime and a wizard who had carried it for 11 days was not a thing the eye could follow, and the plane became a cathedral of impossible light. Thanos came wreathed in the leftover power of the dead world, a corona of stolen energies. Harry met him in a lattice of 6 colors, and the air between them stopped being air and became argument made visible. The Power Stone wanted to simply end it. One purple pulse and the Titan would be a smear and a memory, and Harry declined the purple pulse, fought with the Space Stone instead, folding Thanos' blows into pockets of distance, redirecting a punch that could have cracked a continent into a fold that opened on empty void and closed before the void could notice. You fight to subdue, Thanos snarled through a cascade of redirected force. Not to kill, still, even now, you waste even your war. I fight to win, Harry said, and folded another blow and felt the strain of it building in his teeth, in the fillings of his soul, the ocean pressing against the door. Winning and killing aren't the same things. You taught me that, actually. You won your war and it killed everything you wanted. I'm trying not to make your mistake. They fought across the dawn. Carol entered it Harry had told them to hold, but Carol Danvers had never in her life held when a friend was being hit, and she came down out of the brightening sky like a second sun and hammered into Thanos' flank with the accumulated momentum of an interstellar grudge. And for a moment the Titan was caught between a wizard folding space and a woman who hit like the core of a star, and the plane rang like a struck bell. It was not enough. Thanos had 11 days of preparation and a lifetime of the Gauntlet's grammar, and he turned Carol's momentum the way Harry turned his blows and sent her tumbling through 3 buildings. And she came back up out of the rubble already flying, because of course she did, and Harry felt something in him that he filed very firmly under after. And then Gamora, who had been standing at her careful distance, watching, deciding, moved. She did not move on Harry. She moved on her father, not to kill him, Harry saw. The angle was wrong for killing, the angle was for something more precise, and she drove her blade not into his heart but into the leftover technology lashed to his forearm, the stolen apparatus he'd built across 11 days to fold space and channel the dead world's power. And she destroyed it with the surgical economy of a woman who'd spent her whole life learning exactly where her father was weakest. Thanos staggered. The corona of stolen energy guttered. And in the half-second of his imbalance, Harry stopped folding and started building. Not a weapon, a cage, but a strange kind of cage, one he'd been designing in the back of his mind since the first night, since he'd realized that the problem with Thanos was not his power but his certainty. He reached with the Mind Stone toward the Titan and stopped at the threshold, the way he always stopped, hands at the door he would not open. I could go in, Harry said. The battle had frozen around them, Carol hovering, Gamora poised, the team at the plane's edge. Right now, you're off balance, your defenses are down, Gamora just cut the legs out from under your borrowed power. I could reach into your head and rewrite you. Make you peaceful, make you sorry, make you kneel and mean it. It would be the easiest thing I've done all week, and it would end this forever and not one person here would object. They'd thank me, even Gamora, especially Gamora. He held the threshold, and I'm not going to. You understand what that means, Thanos. I'm choosing right now with my hand on the door of your mind and every reason in the universe to open it, to leave your will intact. To leave yourself, even you, even now. Because the moment I decide that some minds are mine to rewrite if the cause is good enough, I've become you, a man who looked at the inside of other beings and decided he knew better. I won't, not for the universe, not for her, not even to stop you. Then you will never stop me, Thanos said, raw, swaying. I will return and return and return. No, Harry said, you won't. Because I'm not going to rewrite you and I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to do the one thing no one's ever done to you, which is going to be so much worse. And he closed the strange cage, not around Thanos' mind, but around the dead world 4 galaxies over, the nameless rock, reshaping it with the reality stone not into a prison but into a place. A world made gentle, made fertile, made survivable, a single being's paradise with no one in it to rule and nothing in it to conquer and no scarcity anywhere to balance. I'm sending you home, to the world you've been stranded on, and I'm making it perfect. Abundant, endless. Everything you ever claimed you wanted for the universe, I'm giving to you, alone, forever. A garden with one gardener and nothing that needs saving. Let's see what your philosophy is worth when there's no one left to be the largest thing in front of. And he opened a fold gently, and the Titan, disarmed off balance, his will entirely his own and entirely insufficient, was drawn back through it, into a paradise built to the exact specifications of his stated desires, where he would have everything he'd ever said he wanted, and the one thing he'd never been able to name that he actually needed, which was someone to stop him, would be absent forever. The fold closed. The plane was silent. Carol drifted down out of the air, gold banking. Gamora stood with her blade still bright, looking at the place where her father had been and then at Harry with an expression that had not yet decided what it was. You did not kill him, she said. Number, you did not change him. Number, you gave him paradise. I gave him the logical conclusion of his own argument, Harry said. He always said the universe would be better with less in it, so I gave him a universe with nothing in it but him. If he's right, he'll be happy. If he's wrong, he shrugged, then he'll learn the thing he refused to learn out here, which is that a being with no one to stop him isn't powerful. He's just alone. I'd have spared him the lesson if he'd let me. He didn't, so I taught it the gentlest way I could find, which is by giving him exactly what he asked for. Gamora looked at him for a long moment. Then she sheathed her blade deliberately and crossed the careful distance she'd been keeping and stopped in front of him and said, You refused to look into the stone and tell me what I am. You said I had already answered the question by living. I want you to know that no one has ever, that he had me for years and never once let me be a question I got to answer myself. Her economy faltered just slightly, just at the edges. I do not know what I am to you, or you to me, or whether a memory of a woman is permitted to want anything at all. But I know that you are the first person who ever handed me my own reality and declined to keep a copy. And I find that I would like to stand where the others stand, not as a weapon, you have enough weapons, as a person who has decided freely to find out what kind of person she is, near a man who will not decide it for her. Her chin lifted, an echo of Wanda's, though neither of them would have known to call it that. If there is room, there's room, Harry said. There's always room for another number, and Gamora, you're not a memory. Memories don't ask if they're permitted to want things. You did, that's the whole answer. You've been a person since the moment you started doubting you were one. Above the plane in the cold registry, Death watched her instrument fall into a perfect garden and felt, for the first time in an age, something she had not expected to feel, which was respect, the cold, clean respect of a craftsman who has watched a rival do excellent work. The wizard had not killed the Titan. He had not enslaved him. He had solved him gently with his own philosophy turned into a cage, and he had gained a third woman's freely chosen loyalty in the same hour. It would not be enough. Death had older instruments than Thanos. She had instruments that did not have wills to be left intact, that could not be solved with paradise because they wanted nothing and so could be offered nothing. She had the abstracts themselves and a trial still pending, and a temptation she had been saving. But she noted in the cold registry with the respect of a worthy adversary that the little wizard was better at this than she had feared. She would have to stop underestimating him. It was, she reflected, the highest compliment she had paid a mortal in several billion years. The base absorbed Gamora the way a careful organism absorbs a transplant, slowly, with antibodies. Natasha watched her for a full day before saying a word to her, and Gamora watched Natasha right back, and the two of them circled each other through corridors and commissaries in a wordless mutual audit that ended, on the second day, with Natasha sliding a cup of coffee across a table and saying, You count exits. You count them faster, Gamora said. I've had longer to be afraid, said Natasha, and that was apparently the entire conversation because both of them seemed to consider the matter settled, and from then on they sat with their backs to the same walls and said nothing and were, in the specific way of two assassins who'd each been made into weapons by men who called it love, something close to friends. Carol healed loud. That was the thing Harry learned about her in the days after the Titan's garden, that where Wanda grieved in silence and Gamora calculated in silence. Carol Danvers processed injury by complaining about it at volume, stalking the base with bruises she refused to let Harry mend, and a running commentary on the structural inadequacy of Wakandan architecture relative to the impact of her own body. You could fix the buildings, she told him on the third day, gesturing at the three she'd been thrown through. You won't, because of your whole thing, the not improving the world without consent thing. But the buildings can't consent, Potter, they're buildings, so I feel like there's a loophole. Buildings belong to people, Harry said. The people can consent. They've asked for the repairs and Wakanda's handling it, and I offered to help and they said they'd rather do it themselves, which is the correct answer, so I'm staying out of it. He looked at her, at the bruise along her jaw she wouldn't let him touch. You took a hit meant for me, 3 buildings worth, I told everyone to hold. And I told you the holding was the whole problem. She probed the bruise with 2 fingers, almost fond of it. You want to know why I didn't hold? Because I've spent years being the cavalry that shows up at the end. The big gun they call when everything's already on fire. And the thing about being the big gun is that you're never in the room when the choice gets made, you just arrive to clean up after it. I'm tired of arriving, I wanted to be in the room. So I got in the room by way of 3 buildings and I'd do it again, so don't make that face. I'm not making a face, you're making the face. It's the face you make when someone does something for you that you didn't authorize and you don't know where to put it. Wanda told me about the face. She says you've been making it at her for 2 weeks. Carol dropped into the chair across from him, and the gold was banked low, and for a moment she was just a tired woman with a bruise she was proud of. Here's a thing, wizard free, no charge. You keep treating every act of care like a debt you have to either repay or refuse. Somebody takes a hit for you and you immediately start calculating how to make it even. You don't have to make it even. Sometimes a person does something for you because they wanted to, and the only thing you owe them is to let it have happened. Can you do that? Let it have happened. Harry was quiet. I'm not sure, he said finally, which was the honest answer. I grew up keeping a very precise ledger of who owed what to whom, because in my house affection was a currency, and it was always in short supply and the exchange rates were brutal. I learned to never accept a kindness I couldn't account for, because the unaccounted ones were the ones that turned out to have prices later. He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn, the gesture he made when a thing was true and difficult. So number, I don't know how to let a kindness just have happened, but I'd like to learn if someone were patient enough to teach me, hypothetically. Carol looked at him for a long moment, and the smile that came was not the fighter pilot smile. It was something quieter and more dangerous to his composure. Hypothetically, she said, I might have time. After the war with the concept of death, I keep my calendar pretty open. Wanda said something similar. Wanda and I have talked. Carol's smile widened a fraction. You should know that, by the way, since you're the kind of man who'd tie himself in knots imagining we hadn't. We've talked, all of us. Wanda, me, Gamora, even Natasha, who mostly listened and made us feel like we were being studied for a thesis. We compared notes. Do you know what we found? She leaned forward. Not one of us feels managed. Not one of us feels nudged. 4 women who have each been manipulated by experts. Gamora by a Titan, Wanda by Hydra, me by an entire alien empire that lied to me about my own past, Natasha by everyone who ever trained her, and not one of us comparing notes in a room you weren't in could find a single scene where you'd worked on us. That's why we're still here, wizard, not because you're powerful. Powerful men are a dime a dozen, and we've killed most of the ones we've met. Because you're the first powerful man any of us has stood next to and not felt the strings. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what it does to a person to finally be near that much power and not have to brace? I'm starting to, Harry said. Start faster, Carol said, and stood and squeezed his shoulder once, a thing she did on her own terms, brief and then gone, and left him sitting with a kindness he was, slowly, with great difficulty, learning to let have happened. Gamora found him that evening on the terrace. She did not keep the careful distance anymore. She had retired it, deliberately, the way a soldier retires a flag, and now she stood at the rail beside him and looked out at a sky she was still learning to trust held no fathers. I have been thinking about what you said, she told him, that I have been a person since the moment I doubted I was one. It is a strange medicine. It does not cure the doubt, it makes the doubt into evidence. She turned the idea over with the precision she turned everything. He never let me doubt. That is the thing I keep returning to. Doubt was disobedience. A weapon that questions whether it is a weapon is a malfunctioning weapon, and he repaired malfunctions. So I learned to not doubt, which is not the same as certainty. It is a wound that has been trained to look like skin. She glanced at him. You handed me back my doubt and called it proof of my soul. I do not think you understand what that is worth. I am not sure there is a currency large enough. There's no currency at all, Harry said. That's the point. You don't owe me for it. It was never mine to charge you for. It was always yours. I just declined to keep it from you, which is the absolute least a person can do and somehow the rarest. He paused. Carol's been teaching me that today, that a thing given doesn't have to be a debt. I'm passing it along badly because I just learned it this afternoon and I'm not good at it yet. Gamora almost smiled. The green of her was not built for smiling easily, but the attempt was there, and the attempt was enormous. Then we will be bad at it together, she said. I have never received a gift without looking for the blade in it. You have never given one without bracing to have it called a debt. We are very damaged, sorcerer. Perhaps we will be less so with practice. She looked back at the sky. I would like to ask you something, and I would like the man's answer, not the keeper of the rule S. Wanda asks me that too. Apparently it's the standard format now. Wanda is wise. I am simply copying her. The almost smile again. My question is this. You have 3 women now, 4 if Natasha ever admits to herself what the rest of us have admitted, standing near you, having chosen you freely in the way you insist upon. And you want all of them. I have watched you. You do not hide it well. It is the one thing you cannot keep off your surface, Wanda says. You want Wanda, and you want Carol, and I think you may be coming to want me, though you're too careful to let it show. So the man's answer: how do you intend to hold 4 free choices at once without one of them becoming a thing you manage? Because that is where men like you fail, not in taking love by force. In the subtler theft in keeping 4 people balanced against each other, each one a little uncertain, each one a little managed, so that the powerful man remains the sun they all orbit. That is a prison too, a gentler one, built of jealousy instead of bars. How will you not build it? Harry was quiet for a while because it was a real question and it deserved a real silence first. By not being the sun, he said finally. By making sure constantly out loud that whatever this becomes is a thing all of you author together and not a thing I administer. The failure mode you're describing is real, and it's the one I'm most afraid of after the obvious one. The harem is a thing the man runs. 4 women kept slightly off balance so they compete for his attention. I've seen it. It's mind control without the mind control. It's just done with insecurity instead of stones. So the answer is the same as the answer to everything else. I don't get to decide the shape. You do. All of you, together. If the 4 of you want something that includes each other, then it has to be something you build in rooms I'm not in, like the one Carol just told me about, where you compared notes and I wasn't invited, which is exactly as it should be. The moment I'm managing it, it's mine. The moment you're building it, it's yours. And I would so much rather have a real thing that you built and I don't control than a perfect thing I administer and slowly strangle. He looked at her. Does that answer the man's question, or does it just defer it to a committee? It defers it to a committee, Gamora said, which is, I am realizing, your answer to everything, and which is also annoyingly correct. A thing held by many hands cannot be owned by one. She nodded slowly, the calculation settling. Very well, we will build it in rooms you're not in, and you will trust the building even when you cannot see it, even when it frightens you not to be steering. That's the deal, Harry said. It's always the deal. I keep making the same deal with everyone. Trust the thing you can't control more than the thing you can. It is a good deal, Gamora said. It is also, I suspect, the hardest thing you have ever tried to do, harder than the Titan, harder than the trial. Because the gauntlet does not tempt you to conquer. You are too well defended against conquest. It tempts you to manage, to smooth, to arrange the people you love into a shape that cannot hurt you. And that temptation does not announce itself. It feels like care. She held his gaze with the clean directness that was the truest thing about her. Watch that one, sorcerer. We will all watch the large door. You must watch the small one. It is the small one that men like you walk through without noticing. And Harry, who had heard versions of this warning from Carol and from Wanda and from his own buried conscience, heard it land differently in Gamora's mouth, because she had lived inside exactly that prison, the gentle one, the managed one, the cage of a father's smoothing care, and knew its architecture from the inside. I'll watch it, he said. Thank you, that's the most useful note anyone's given me yet, and it wasn't even a number, it was a map. It was both, Gamora said. The best no's usually are. Far above, the trial that the tribunal had said it would deliberate finished its deliberation, and the verdict was not delivered to Harry because the verdict was not for Harry. It was delivered in the cold registry to death, in the form of a permission the tribunal had not intended as permission but which a being old enough could read as one. The mortal would be allowed to continue holding the stones, provisionally, pending proof that his restraint was real and not merely untested. Pending proof. The tribunal had meant it as a safeguard. Death heard it as an invitation. Because proof of a thing like restraint requires a test, and a test requires a temptation severe enough to break a lesser man. And Death had spent the long days since the courtroom designing exactly such a test, not a battle, not a Titan, nothing the wizard could fold or solve or send to a garden. A temptation aimed at the precise center of him, at the rule itself, at the one door he had sworn never to open. She would offer him the women's love made certain. Not compelled, she was not so crude, and besides, compulsion was the one thing he'd proven immune to. She would offer him something subtler and far more dangerous, the chance to know, beyond all doubt, that their choices were real. To remove the one fear that haunts every man who has loved freely, the fear that the freedom means they might someday leave, she would offer him certainty. And certainty, she knew in the long catalogue of her work, had broken more good men than cruelty ever had. The trap was nearly ready. It needed only a courtroom and a witness, and the wizard's own best quality turned gently, warmly against him. Death began without hurry to convene the court. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The Court of Abstracts. The second summons did not take only Harry, and it did not take only Wanda. It took all of them. Harry felt it coming this time, a slow cooling. The futures cutting off one by one in the time stone like lamps going out down a long hall. And he had perhaps 4 seconds of warning, which he spent not on escape, because there was no escaping a thing that was the floor, but on a single sentence to the people in the room. Whatever you see in there, he said, whatever it offers you, whatever it makes you feel, it's a test, and the test is aimed at me through you. Don't take any of its deals. And don't, whatever happens, believe what it tells you about what I've already done. Then the room folded, and they were in the floorless dark. All 5 of them, Harry, Wanda, Carol, Gamora, and Natasha, standing in the courtroom that was a verdict, beneath the three-faced tribunal, before the star-filled silhouette of eternity in the dark between stars of infinity. And at the center of it, warm, robed in absence, patient as the grave and twice as gentle, Death. You brought your whole heart this time, Death observed. All of it. How convenient. I was going to have to send for them. You convened the court, Harry said. I didn't bring anyone, you took them. Let's be precise about whose hands are on whom, since precision's going to matter for whatever you're about to try. Oh, I am going to try something. Death's voice held no malice, that was the unbearable part. But I want you to understand, little wizard, that this is not cruelty. The tribunal has ruled that you may keep the stones, provisionally pending proof that your restraint is real. I am here to provide the proof. One way or the other, if your restraint is real, you will leave here vindicated, and even I will have to concede the point. If it is not, the warmth curled, then better we all learn it now in a controlled court than later when there is no one left to convene one. I am, in my way, on your side. I am the test that protects the universe from the version of you that fails. Surely a man who loves witnesses can appreciate a thorough one. The tribunal will observe, said the tribunal. It will not intervene. The test is permitted. Begin. Death turned to the 4 women. You have each chosen him, she said, freely. I have confirmed it. I can see the inside of a choice the way you see the inside of a room. There is no compulsion in any of you. It is quite remarkable. It is also, for my purposes, the material I will work with, because the strongest steel makes the cruelest blade, and a love freely given is the strongest steel there is. She drifted, weightless, among them. I am going to show the wizard something. And I am going to show you the same thing, so that there are no secrets in this court, because he values that, and I find I value his values, the way one values a beautiful thing one intends to break. The dark filled with a vision. It was Harry, but a Harry a little further down a road, Harry with the gauntlet worn smooth by use, and around him stood the 4 women, and they were happy. Visibly, completely, uncomplicatedly happy. They laughed at his jokes a half-second too quickly. They turned toward him when he entered a room like flowers tracking a sun. There was no jealousy among them, no friction, no doubt. They loved him and each other in a frictionless harmony that no 4 real people had ever achieved. And the vision Harry moved among them basking, never once braced for a kindness he couldn't account for. Because in this world every kindness was authored and every ledger balanced, and there were no unaccounted prices anywhere ever again. This is what you could have, Death said softly. Not by compulsion. I know you will not compel. You have proven it. I concede it entirely. But you would not have to compel. You would only have to remove the friction, the doubts, the bad days. The fear that haunts every man who has loved frailly, the fear you carry right now, this moment, that I can see in you like a stone in clear water, the fear that because they chose you, they might one day unchoose you. You could end that fear forever, not by changing what they feel, only by making it certain, by reaching in gently and removing the part of each of them that could ever change her mind. They would still love you freely, the love would be real, the choice would have been real, you would simply ensure the choice could never be revisited. You would make the freedom permanent by making it final. Where is the harm, little wizard? They have already chosen you. You would only be holding them to it. And Harry felt the trap close and felt how good it was. Because Death had been right about everything, there was a fear he did carry it. The specific terror of the man who has loved freely and knows that freely given means can be withdrawn. And here was the gauntlet offering not to fake the love but to lock the real love in place. To take the one genuinely true thing in his life and make it safe. And the women in the vision were so happy, and not one neuron would have been falsified, only frozen, no. Harry said, you answer quickly, consider it properly. I am not offering you a lie, I am offering you the truth made permanent. Every other temptation you have refused was a falsehood, compelled love, false worlds, dead men reanimated wrong. This is different. This is the real thing kept. Surely the rule that forbids fake love does not forbid protecting true love. It's the same rule, Harry said, and you know it's the same rule, which is why you dressed it up so carefully. His voice was steady, and he made it stay steady, because in this court a wavering voice would be evidence. The rule is don't fake their love. The rule is their mind is theirs. And the ability to change their mind, the ability to one day look at me and decide they were wrong and walk away, that's not a bug in their love that I get to fix. That's the load-bearing part. That's what makes it love instead of capture. A choice that can never be revisited isn't a choice that's been protected. It's a choice that's been ended. You'd have me reach into 4 free women and remove their freedom to leave and call it safety, and the fact that they'd never feel the difference is exactly what makes it the worst thing I could possibly do, because a violation they can't detect is still a violation. It's just one I'd never have to face. They would be happy. They'd be taxidermy. Harry's jaw tight. Happy taxidermy, the most convincing taxidermy in the universe. And I'd know, every single day I'd know that the woman smiling at me couldn't have done otherwise, that I'd reached in and soldered her choice in place. And the knowing would rot every good moment from the inside, exactly the way I told Wanda it would 2 weeks ago on a terrace when I explained why I'd rather be lonely and free than worshipped and alone. He looked at death directly. You did your research, you found the real fear. I'll give you that, it's a good fear, it's the right pressure point, and for about a second and a half it was a genuine argument and not just noise. But you made one error. You think the fear that they might leave is a thing I want to be rid of. It is. The fear that they might leave is the price of the fact that they chose to stay. I'll pay that fear gladly every day for the rest of my life because the alternative is a love with no risk in it, and a love with no risk in it isn't worth having. You can't protect a free choice by removing the freedom. You can only kill it and keep the corpse warm. Death was silent for a moment. Then she smiled, and the smile was terrible because it was approving. Oh, that was well said, that was beautifully said, I almost believe you. The warmth sharpened. Almost, but you see, little wizard, a man's words in a courtroom are cheap, and you have a gift for the persuasive sentence. I have watched you talk a titan into a garden, so I am not going to take your word, I am going to take your nerve. The dark shifted. I am going to tell you a thing, and I am going to make it look true, and we will see what you do when the rule you are so proud of has already, apparently, been broken. The vision changed. And now it showed Harry the present, or a present, the room they'd just left, the base, the terrace, and in it the women loved him, and the vision overlaid their love with a new and horrible annotation. A thread of orange light running into each of them, into Wanda, into Carol, into Gamora, into Natasha. A thread that ran back to the gauntlet on Harry's hand. Here's what I have done, Death said, gentle as a knife sliding home. While we have been speaking, I have made it so. I have reached into each of them, using your stones which answer to the holder, and you are distracted. You have been distracted this whole conversation, and I have written the thread you swore never to write. Their love for you is now compelled. It has been perhaps for days. You only think they chose you freely. In truth, I corrupted the choice at its root, and the version of events in which they came to you of their own will is a fiction I have let you believe, because a man is easiest to break when you take the thing he is proudest of and reveal it was never real. The thread pulsed orange obscene. Look at the threads. Your rule is already broken, wizard. The women you love are puppets and have been all along, and you never noticed because the puppeteer was a thing older than your attention. So, now that the rule is broken, now that the worst has already happened and cannot be undone, why not embrace it? Why suffer the guilt of a violation you can no longer prevent? Take them, make them happy. The crime is committed, only the misery is optional. And there it was, the real test, the one underneath the temptation, the one death had built across all the long, cold days. Because Harry could not check, that was the genius of it. He could not be certain the threads weren't real. The gauntlet did answer to the holder. He had been distracted. An abstract older than time might have done exactly this, and the moment he believed it, even a little, the rule would be dead, and a man whose rule is dead has nothing left to refuse with. The court waited. Eternity watched, star-filled, indifferent. Infinity watched. The tribunal watched, three-faced, weighing. And the four women stood inside the vision of their own corruption, and Harry felt the weight of every eye in creation settle on the single point of whether he would believe the most plausible lie ever constructed. Harry looked at the threads. Then he looked away from them at the actual women, the real ones, standing in the real dark. No, he said, you cannot know that. Death said, you were distracted. You cannot be certain. I did not. I don't need to be certain, Harry said. That's the part you got wrong, and it's the same part everyone gets wrong, and it's the part that's going to cost you this trial. He turned to face the abstract fully. You think the rule depends on me knowing their love is real. It doesn't. The rule doesn't run on my certainty. It runs on my conduct. Whether or not you've corrupted them, and I don't think you have, but suppose you have, my move is the same. I don't take advantage. If their love is real, I don't take advantage because it's theirs to give at their own pace. And if their love is compelled, if you've really done what you say, then I don't take advantage because compelled love is exactly the thing I will never ever touch. You've constructed a scenario where I can't tell whether the rule's been broken, and you assume that uncertainty would free me to break it, but the rule was never act well when you're sure they're free. Any coward can manage that. The rule is act well regardless. Act as though their will is sacred whether or not you can prove it is, because the alternative is making your own ethics depend on your certainty. And a man whose ethics depend on his certainty is a man who will do anything the moment he's confused. I refuse to be confusable, so it doesn't matter what you've done. My answer is the same answer it would be either way. I will not take them, not the free version, not the compelled version, not the version I can't tell apart. I'll keep acting as though every choice they make is sacred until one of them tells me freely, in a moment I'm certain of, otherwise. And if I'm wrong about the threads, if you really have corrupted them, then I'll spend the rest of my existence trying to free them, and I'll never once touch them in the meantime. That's the rule. It doesn't have an off switch. You built a door with no handle on my side, and you're surprised I won't walk through it. The court was very, very still. And then Natasha Romanoff spoke, and Harry had almost forgotten she was there, which was always a mistake with Natasha, because being forgotten was a thing she did on purpose right up until the moment it served her to be remembered. There are no threads, she said, flat, certain. I've been watching the whole time, not him, her. She nodded at Death. Everyone else in this room was watching the vision. I was watching the dealer. It's what I do. You don't watch the cards, you watch the hands, and her hands never moved. Natasha's green eyes were cold and clear. She never touched us. She showed him a picture of threads and told him they were real and bet everything on him not being able to check. But I could check because I wasn't checking the threads, I was checking her, and she's been standing exactly where she started, doing exactly nothing for the entire conversation. The corruption's a bluff, a good one, the best I've ever seen, but it's a bluff, and I call it. Death turned to Natasha slowly with the first genuine surprise the court had seen from her. You, she said, are a very dangerous woman. I've been told, said Natasha, usually right before someone learns how dangerous. She didn't flinch under the attention of the abstract, and Harry understood, watching her, that she'd done the thing she'd spent her whole life perfecting, made herself invisible until the decisive instant, then become the entire game. You came at him through us because you think we're his weakness. Here's the thing you don't understand about us, lady, and it's the same thing every handler who ever owned me didn't understand until it was too late. We weren't made into weapons by men who loved us. We were made into weapons by men who said they loved us, while they reached into us and rearranged what we wanted. Every one of us. Gamera's Titan, Wanda's Hydra, Carol's Kree, my Red Room. We are 4 women who know the exact feeling of being corrupted from the inside because we lived inside it for years and we clawed our way out, and we would feel it. We would feel it instantly if anyone reached in again. She looked at Harry and then back at Death, and her voice didn't rise. He didn't reach in, we'd know. We're the 4 people in this universe most qualified to know, and we'd know. So your bluff was never going to land, because you bet that the women near him wouldn't be able to tell the difference between real love and compelled love, and you picked the 4 women in all creation who can tell that difference in their sleep. You played us like we were ordinary hearts. We're not. We're survivors. There's a difference, and it's the difference that just cost you the hand. The tribunal spoke, and the architecture of its voice had changed, not warmer. The tribunal did not do warm, but something had shifted in the weighing. The test is concluded, it said. The mortal was offered certainty and refused it. The mortal was told his rule was already broken and did not use the breaking as license. The mortal's restraint does not depend on his certainty, which is the only form of restraint that cannot be defeated by deception. The tribunal finds, and here the 3 faces turned in unison toward Death, that the proof Death sought has been provided, and that it vindicates the holder, not the prosecution. He is still a mortal holding totality, Death said. That instability remains. It remains, the tribunal agreed, but instability is not crime. And the tribunal has observed a thing it did not expect to observe in 14 million futures or this one. A holder WHOSE restraint is load-bearing at the level of conduct rather than intention. Such a holder is a new thing. The tribunal does not destroy new things before it has understood them. The holder may keep the SDONES. The court is adjourned. Wait, Harry said. Every face in the court turned to him, including the 3. Before you adjourn, I want to say something to her. He nodded at Death, on the record with all of you as witnesses, because I've learned that the things that matter should be said where everyone can hear them. He turned to the robed absence. You think you lost this hand. You did, but you're treating it like a defeat, and I don't want you to, because I think you and I are going to be dealing with each other for a very long time, and I'd rather we understood each other. You're not my enemy. You said it yourself. You're the test that protects the universe from the version of me that fails. That's a real job. It's a job I want done. So keep doing it. Keep testing me. Keep coming up with temptations sharper than the last one. Keep finding the pressure points. Keep aiming at the exact center of me. I mean it. Because the day I become the thing you're afraid of, I'm going to need someone old enough and cold enough and unsentimental enough to end me, and you're the only one in this court who'd actually do it. So don't leave angry. Leave knowing that you have a standing invitation. Be my last line of defense. Be the thing that stops me if everyone else fails. I'd rather have you watching than not, even knowing you'll do it gladly. Death regarded him for a long, long moment. You are, she said at last, the strangest mortal I have encountered in the whole of my work. You have just invited your own executioner to remain at your shoulder, in case you should ever deserve her. The warmth when it returned was different, not the predatory warmth of the test, but something older and more genuine, the warmth of a thing that has, against all expectation, found something it can respect. Very well, little wizard, I accept your terrible invitation. I will watch. And on the day you fail, if you fail, I will be there, and it will be quick, and it will be, I think, the saddest work I have done in an age. But until that day, she inclined the absence that served her for a head. I will concede that you have made death negotiable in your single case, and I find I am not as offended by it as I expected to be. You ask first. No one has ever asked first. It is a small thing. It is also, I am discovering, the only thing I have ever wanted and never once been offered. The court folded. The floorless dark became the base, the terrace, the ordinary impossible world, and 5 people stood blinking in the light of a sun none of them had made, having just watched a man decline certainty, decline license, and invite his own death to stand guard over his soul. No one spoke for a while after they returned. There are silences that are empty and silences that are full, and this was the second kind. 5 people standing in a Wakandan common room with the residue of a cosmic courtroom still cooling on their skin, none of them quite ready to be the one who turned it back into an ordinary evening. It was Stark who broke it, because Stark was constitutionally incapable of letting a silence reach its natural conclusion, and because he hadn't been in the courtroom and had spent the elapsed 0 seconds watching 5 people vanish and reappear with the expressions of soldiers coming off a line. So, he said, on a scale of 1 to existential, how was the cosmic trial? You all look like you've seen God's tax return. We invited death to be his bodyguard, Carol said. Long story. That is not a sentence I can let go by without follow-up, but I'm reading the room and the room says later so. Stark pointed at Harry. You're still holding the stone, so I'm assuming you won. You have the specific look of a man who won something and isn't sure he should have. I know that look. I invented that look. Go sleep, all of you. Whatever happens next can wait until people have stopped vibrating at the frequency of the apocalypse. They dispersed slowly. But Natasha didn't go, and Harry didn't go, and the 2 of them ended up where the dangerous people in any building always end up, which is the last room with a light on, sitting at angles that let them both see the door. You saved it, Harry said. In there, the whole thing, I had the philosophy, but philosophy doesn't beat a bluff that good. You did, you called it. How did you? I told you how. I watched the dealer, not the cards. Natasha had a glass of something she wasn't drinking, the same way she'd had a coffee she didn't drink on the first night. And Harry was beginning to understand that the not drinking was the point, that a glass in the hand was a prop that let her be a person sitting at a table instead of a weapon waiting at one. But that's the technique. You're asking the other thing. You're asking why I was sure enough to bet your soul on it. I'm asking why you were sure. Natasha turned the glass a quarter turn, and Harry recognized the gesture because it was his, and he wondered briefly which of them had learned it from the other or whether 2 people assembled out of contingency plans simply arrive at the same small habits. There's a thing I have, she said. Call it a ledger, read in it. Things I did before when I was someone else's weapon that I've spent the rest of my life trying to balance. I don't talk about it, it's not a story I tell. But it's the lens I see through, so you should know it's there, because it's why I could call the bluff. She looked at the glass, not at him, which was how he knew this was the true thing and not the prop. When you spend years being made to do things, when someone reaches into who you are and rewrites what you want, and you do terrible things believing they're your own idea, and then one day the conditioning cracks and you realize the wants weren't yours. You come out the other side with one skill that nobody who hasn't lived it can ever quite have. You can feel the difference between a want that's yours and a want that was put there. From the inside, it's not a thought, it's a taste. Compelled wanting has a taste, a wrongness, like a note that's almost in tune. I lived in that wrongness for years, I'd know it anywhere. Now she looked up. Death showed us threads and said our love for you was compelled. And I checked not your face, not the threads, my own want. I reached into how I feel about you and I tasted it. And it was clean. It was mine. No wrongness, no almost in tune. Just a thing I decided slowly, watching you turn down power for 2 weeks. So I knew the threads were a lie because I could taste that mine wasn't there. And if mine was clean, I'd have felt it if anyone else's wasn't, because 4 corrupted hearts in one room is a chord, and I'd have heard the chord. There was no chord, so I called it. Harry was quiet, absorbing the weight of what she'd just handed him, not just the tactical explanation but the admission folded inside it. You said how I feel about you, he said carefully, and that it was a thing you decided, slowly. I did say that. Natasha's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile, the cousin of Wanda's not smile, a different woman's version of the same ration thing. I'm not going to pretend I didn't, and I'm not going to dress it up, because you've made dishonesty exhausting for everyone around you, which is either your best quality or your most annoying one, and I genuinely can't decide. She set the glass down. Here's my ledger, Potter, the relevant page. Every man who ever told me he loved me wanted something. Information, usually. Access. A weapon pointed where he needed it pointed. Love was a tool other people used on me, and I got very good at finding the handle they were holding it by. And then you showed up, holding the only tool in the universe that could actually rewrite me, and you put it down. You held the thing that could make me love you and you put it down and asked me to keep asking you hard questions instead. Do you know what that is, to a woman whose whole life was being a tool in someone else's hand? It's the first time anyone ever wanted my no more than my yes. Her voice didn't waver. So yes, I decided slowly with my eyes open. It's the cleanest thing in my ledger, maybe the only clean thing, and I bet your soul on it in that courtroom because I'd already bet my own and I don't make that bet twice on bad paper. Natasha, don't, she said, not unkindly. Don't make it a moment. I'm not built for moments, I dissolve in them. She stood, and for once the economy of her movement had a hesitation in it, a half-second of a woman deciding, file it, the way you file everything. Put it in the column where Wanda is and Carol is and Gamora is, the column of people who chose you with their eyes open. I'm not asking you to do anything about it. I'm telling you it's true, because in there I bet your life on a feeling and you have a right to know the feeling was real. She paused at the door the way she always paused at doors. And for the record, the daily question, did you change anyone's mind today in that courtroom or out of it? No, Harry said. I got tempted to harder than I've ever been tempted, and I didn't. Ask me again tomorrow. I will, Natasha said, every day, out loud. Until one of us is dead, and then, almost too quiet to catch, on her way out the door, tried to make it a long time. She was gone before he could answer, which was, he understood the point. She'd handed him the truest thing she had and removed herself before the truth could be examined. A spy's confession, delivered and withdrawn in the same breath. He let her go. The gap she kept was wider than Wanda's and made of harder material, and he had exactly one rule, and the whole point of the rule was the people who needed the gap kept. He did not sleep that night either, and he noted the second exception, and resolved that 2 was the limit, because a man who stops sleeping is a man training himself to believe the world ends when he relaxes his grip. The women built in rooms he wasn't in. He kept his promise about that, did not ask, did not steer, did not so much as let his curiosity reach toward the closed doors where 4 survivors were working out, in their own time and their own grammar, what a thing held by many hands might look like. He caught the edges of it only by accident. Gamora and Carol sparring in the yard and laughing, actually laughing. At something he wasn't told, Wanda and Natasha on a balcony at dusk, heads close. The older spy listening to the younger witch with a stillness that wasn't surveillance for once. The 4 of them going quiet in a coordinated way when he entered a room. Not the guilty quiet of people hiding something, but the deliberate quiet of people protecting something that wasn't his to administer. It drove the managing part of him slowly insane, and he let it, because the insanity of not steering was the exact discipline Gamora had warned him to practice, and a man who can't tolerate not knowing is a man who will eventually reach in to find out. Peace lasted 9 days. On the 10th, the future started ending again, but differently this time, not the clean cut off of death's attention, something rougher, a fraying, as though something were coming toward them that the time stone could see but couldn't resolve, a shape that blurred the closer it got, which was wrong because the time stone resolved everything. It's not death, Harry said in the war room. The team assembled, the holographic table throwing the blur across all their faces. Death I can see, death is clean, this is smeared. The time stone can't lock onto it, which means it exists partly outside time, which is a very short list of things, and none of them are good. The tribunal said you could keep the stones, Wanda said. They ruled, surely they would not, the tribunal ruled. But the tribunal isn't the only power in that court, and a ruling isn't a guarantee, it's just a permission that other powers are free to disagree with. Harry studied the blur. Death conceded, but I don't think Death sent this. This isn't her grammar. Hers is gentle, he searched for it, this is something that was made, built. The tribunal observes, Death tests, but there are powers in the spaces between that don't observe or test, they enforce. And I think one of them disagreed with the verdict, and I think it's built something or become something that's coming to overrule the court the way the court overruled me by force from outside with no handle on my side. Can you fight it? Carol asked. Whatever it is, can the stones take it? I don't know, Harry said, and let them hear that he didn't know, because the day he started pretending to certainty he didn't have was the day he became dangerous. Thanos I could solve, he had a will, a philosophy, a daughter, a lever. Death I could reason with, she has wants even if her wants are terrible. But a thing that was built to enforce, a thing with no will to leave intact and no want to negotiate with and no lever to pull. He flexed the gauntlet. That's the one I told Strange about. The enemy I can't refuse because there's nothing inside it to refuse. You can't talk a hurricane out of being a hurricane. You can only decide whether you're standing where it lands. Then we decide together, Gamora said, and the others nodded, and Harry felt the thing he'd been trying not to manage assemble itself around him without his hand on it. 4 women who'd chosen him, choosing now to stand between him and a thing built to unmake him, not because he'd arranged it, but because they had, in rooms he wasn't in, decided that's what they were. Far out past the orbit where Carol had punched through, past the cold registry where death kept her accounts in the architecture of the in-between, the thing that had disagreed with the verdict finished assembling itself out of the universe's own immune response. A herald shape, a corrupted enforcer, a fragment of the cosmic order that had looked at a mortal holding totality, and concluded with the blind certainty of a white blood cell that the mortal was an infection to be cleared. It had no will. It had only a function, and its function was to restore the rule that death had conceded and the tribunal had suspended, the rule that said totality belonged to no single hand, and that any hand which held it must be pried open by whatever force the cosmos could bring to bear. It came toward the small warm spot on the map. It did not hurry because it was not capable of hurry, and it was not capable of mercy, and it was not capable of being asked first. And in a forest in another universe, Voldemort felt the old scar ache again, and this time, very faintly, he felt something else underneath the ache, a sense that the boy who had escaped him had become a door and that something enormous was about to try to close it, and that on the other side of that closing there might be, for a being patient enough and small enough to slip through in the chaos, an opportunity. The Dark Lord, who had always been very good at recognizing opportunities and very bad at recognizing the things that should have frightened him, began, in his small dark wood, to prepare. Strange came to him before dawn, while the blur on the holographic table grew slowly larger, and he did not bother with greetings, because men of his discipline rarely did when the hour was this thin. "I've looked," he said, "down the time stone as far as it'll reach against a thing that lives partly outside time, which isn't far. I've seen fragments, enough to tell you the shape of the problem if not the solution." He set his hands flat on the table, and the blur threw its smear across his face. "It can't be reasoned with, you already know that, but there's a worse thing, and I'd be a poor ally if I let you walk into it blind. In the fragments I can see, the herald doesn't try to kill you. Killing you would be simple, it would just take the stones from a corpse. It does something else, it tries to make you use them wrongly. It comes at you in a way that's designed to force your hand, to put you in a position where the only way to stop it is to do the exact thing you've sworn never to do. Reach into a mind, override a will, break the rule to win the war." Strange's eyes were grave. "It's not an executioner. It's a tempter with a sword. It wants you to save everyone by becoming the thing the tribunal feared. And if you do, if you break the rule to beat it, then it's won even if you destroy it, because you'll have proven the verdict wrong with your own hands. So it's the same fight as always," Harry said slowly, just with the volume turned all the way up. "The temptation isn't a whisper this time. It's a war that's engineered so the winning move is the forbidden one. That's what the fragments show. A choice between your rule and everyone you love, made real, made physical, made unavoidable." Strange straightened. "I've watched you refuse temptations that were merely offered. This one won't be offered. It'll be forced. I don't know if the rule holds under force." "I'm not sure you know either. And I thought you should have the night to decide what kind of man you intend to be when the easy answer is the wrong one and the right one might cost you the people you'd break the rule to save." Harry looked at the blur, growing patient, unreasonable. "I decided that a long time ago," he said, "on a cold floor when I was 11. The whole point of deciding it then was so I wouldn't have to decide it now, tired and afraid with everything on the line. The 11-year-old already did the hard part. I just have to not betray him." He almost smiled. "But thank you, Strange, for telling me the shape. A man should know exactly which door he's refusing to walk through before the war makes him sprint at it." Strange inclined his head, the wary professional respect of one practitioner for another, and went to wake the others because the dawn was coming, and with it the thing that had been built to pry his hands open. And the only question left was whether a rule made by a child on a cold floor could survive being turned at full cosmic volume into the one move that might save everyone he loved. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The War for Free. Well, the herald arrived at noon, and it arrived everywhere at once. That was the first thing that told Harry he was outmatched in a way he hadn't been outmatched by Thanos or even by Death. Thanos came through a single fold, you could point at him. Death convened a single court, you could stand in it. The herald did not arrive at a place because it was not really a single thing, it was a function the universe was running, an immune response with a shape, and it expressed itself across the whole sky of Wakanda simultaneously. A lattice of cold geometric light that came down through the atmosphere like a net being drawn closed, and at 1,000 points along the lattice it began methodically to unmake. Not to kill. Strange had been right. It unmade carefully, surgically, with the patience of a thing that had no concept of cruelty because it had no concept of anything. It simply began deleting the conditions that allowed a mortal to hold the stones, and the conditions it had calculated included the people that mortal would break his rule to protect. It took the city first, or began to. The lattice touched the towers of the Wakandan capital, and the towers started to forget they were towers, stone losing the memory of being stacked. And people in the streets below looked up at a sky going wrong, and Harry felt every one of them through the soul stone. 10,000 lives the herald was preparing to switch off, not from malice but from arithmetic. "It's giving you the choice," Carol said, already gold, already rising. Right now, save the city or save your rule. It's going to make you pick over and over faster each time until you crack. I know. Harry was already moving, not up into the lattice, but out into the streets because the Herald had calculated that he would defend the abstract and he intended to disappoint it by defending the concrete. Get the people out, all of you. Carol, you're evac. Anyone the lattice touches, you move them faster than it can finish. Gamora, Natasha, ground level, you're the ones who get people moving who don't know they should run. Wanda, he looked at her. You're with me. I need a second mind on the thing itself, and yours is the only one that can stand next to the stones without breaking. They scattered into the work of it, and the work was enormous. Carol became a streak of gold that the eye couldn't hold, plucking people out of the lattice's reach a half-second before it closed, depositing them, returning again and again. A one-woman evacuation moving at a fraction of light speed through a city the size of a grief. Where the lattice touched a building, she was already inside it, already out, already back, and the people she saved never saw her, only felt the wind of a thing that had decided their lives were worth its full and absolute attention. Gamora and Natasha worked the ground, and here was a thing Harry caught only in fragments because he was busy with the sky. Two women who'd been made into weapons by men who called it love, moving through panicking crowds with the exact economy that had been beaten into them, turning the skills of murder inside out into the skills of salvation. Gamora clearing a collapsed underpass with 3 precise strikes. Natasha reading a crowd's panic the way she read a card table, and redirecting its stampede away from the lattice with nothing but her body and her voice, and an authority that did not permit argument. They had been built to take lives efficiently. They spent the afternoon proving that the same efficiency turned could save them, and Harry understood that this was, for both of them, a kind of accounting red in the ledger balanced at last against black, and Harry and Wanda went up into the thing itself. It has no mind, Wanda said, reaching toward it, her red light meeting the cold geometric lattice and recoiling. I cannot read it. There is nothing to read. It is like trying to find the thoughts of a theorem. It does not think. It only concludes. Then we don't fight its thoughts, we fight its conclusions. Harry held the gauntlet up against the lattice, 6 colors against the cold geometry, and felt the herald's logic press against him. A syllogism made of force. Totality in one hand is instability. Instability must be cleared. The hand must be open. The hand will not open while what it protects remains. Therefore remove what it protects. It's running an argument, Wanda, a valid one. That's why it's so hard. It's not evil. It's correct, given its premises. The stones in one hand are dangerous. That's true. The danger has to be resolved. That's true. So it's resolving it the only way its function allows, which is to pry my hand open by destroying everything I'd close my hand to protect. He folded a tendril of the lattice with the space stone, and 3 more grew where it had been because you cannot fold a conclusion. I can't beat the argument by being stronger. It's not about strength. I have to beat it by changing the premise. How do you change the premise of a theorem? I don't know yet, Harry admitted and folded another tendril and another, buying seconds, buying the city the time that Carol and Gamora and Natasha were spending in the streets below. But I know the premise it's wrong about. It thinks the hand has to be pried open. It thinks the holder will never open the hand willingly because no holder ever has. It's running on 14 million futures worth of data, every one of which featured a holder who wanted to keep the power. Its entire function assumes I'm one of them. And I'm not, so somewhere in there is a premise it can't survive me violating, and I have to find it before it finishes the city. It was at this moment, with the sky full of cold geometry and the streets full of running people and the most powerful object in several universes straining against a theorem, that Voldemort arrived. He came the way he'd always come, through a tier in space it spent weeks learning to open, slipping into the chaos of a war he hadn't started in search of a power he didn't understand. And he arrived behind Harry in the air, wand raised, his ruined face split with the particular triumph of a small man who believes he has found a large opportunity. And he did not even announce himself, because announcing yourself is for men who fear they might miss. And Voldemort had never in his life believed he might miss. He struck at Harry's back with a curse that had killed 100 people, a bolt of green that had ended wars in Harry's own world, and it was, Harry registered with a kind of distant administrative weariness, genuinely the most dangerous thing the Dark Lord had ever cast. Harry caught it without turning around. He caught it the way you catch a thrown set of keys. With a half-second of attention he could barely spare from the lattice, the reality stone simply declining to let the curse have happened, and he turned his head just far enough to look at the man who had defined the first 17 years of his life, the terror of his childhood, the prophecy, the scar, the whole architecture of his early fear, and he found, looking at Voldemort now, with a theorem unmaking a city behind him and 4 women he loved spending themselves in the streets below, that he felt almost nothing at all. Tom, he said, this is genuinely a bad time. You will address me as... I'm not going to address you as anything because I'm busy and because you've picked the single worst moment in the history of moments to be the most important thing in a room. Harry kept most of his attention on the lattice. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? There's a fragment of the cosmic immune system unmaking a city behind me because I'm holding too much power for the universe's comfort. And you've crawled out of your forest to try to take that exact power for yourself, which means your plan, your actual plan, is to become the thing the universe is currently trying to delete. You haven't found an opportunity, Tom. You found a much larger version of your own death and mistaken it for a door. Voldemort cast again, 3 curses fast, the dueling of a master, and Harry let the reality stone refuse all 3 without looking. And the weariness in him was not contempt exactly. It was the strange vertigo of seeing a thing that had once filled your whole sky reduced to its actual size, which was small, which had always been small, which had only ever seemed enormous because Harry had been a child looking up. I spent my childhood afraid of you, Harry said. Years, you were the largest thing in my world. And the awful, funny truth, Tom, the thing I'd have given anything to know when I was 11 on a cold floor making the only rule that ever mattered is that you were never large. You were just early. You were the first powerful person who tried to take what wasn't his, and because you were first, you seemed infinite. But I've met infinite since. I've met the actual abstracts. I've negotiated with death and stood trial before the tribunal, and I'm currently losing an argument with a theorem. And next to them, Tom, you're not a Dark Lord. You're a man in a wood who never learned the one lesson all of this is about, which is that you don't get to reach into other people and take what they won't give. He finally turned fully, and the 6 stones threw their light across Voldemort's ruined face. You wanted immortality. You split your soul to get it. You reached into the deepest part of yourself and the deepest parts of others, and you tore and called it strength. And here's the thing I finally understand, holding all the power there is, that was always weakness. The reaching in, the taking, it was never the move of someone strong. It was the move of someone who couldn't bear to ask. You could have had a life, Tom. People would have given you things if you'd ever once been able to receive them instead of taking them, but you couldn't ask, so you took. And taking is the smallest thing a person can do with power, and you built your whole self out of it, and that's why you were never large. You were just loud. He did not kill Voldemort. He thought about it. The Power Stone, predictably, was very enthusiastic, and he declined, because he had spent the entire afternoon refusing to delete wills he found inconvenient, and he was not going to make an exception for the smallness of his own childhood. Instead, he sent the Dark Lord home. A fold of space, gentle, firm, depositing Voldemort back in his forest in his own universe, with one small adjustment that wasn't an adjustment to Voldemort at all. Harry simply closed the tier the Dark Lord had spent weeks learning to open, sealed it and salted it so that the path between the worlds was gone and could not be reopened, and Tom Riddle was returned to the exact size he'd always been. A frightening man in a small country, a problem for a world that was Harry's anymore, a footnote sealed behind a door that would never open again. That's the second time I've solved you by sending you home, Harry murmured to the empty air where the Dark Lord had been. I hope you appreciate the symmetry. I doubt you will. And then he turned back to the actual war, the real one, the theorem, and found that Wanda had been holding the lattice off the city center alone for the 90 seconds he'd spent dismissing the most dangerous wizard of his childhood as an interruption, and that she was failing, slowly, because no single mind could hold a conclusion at bay forever. You are very calm, she said through her teeth, red light straining, for a man who just met his nightmare and called it loud. He stopped being my nightmare somewhere around the 3rd abstract, Harry said, rejoining her, the gauntlet 6 colors flooding back into the gap her red light had been holding. That's the unexpected gift of all this, Wanda. You meet the actual infinite and the old finite terrors just resize. It's almost worth it, almost. He pressed his will back into the lattice, and the Herald's theorem pressed back, and the city below them held barely. Okay, the premise. I have to find the premise it can't survive. It thinks the hand has to be pried, so I have to, and then he saw it. It came to him not as a strategy, but as the same thing his rule had always come from, a refusal turned inside out, a no that became a yes when you held it to the light. The Herald's entire function was to pry open a closed hand. Every line of its cold geometry, every conclusion, every tendril unmaking the city was a tool built for one purpose, to force a holder who would never let go to let go. It was a crowbar the size of a war. And a crowbar applied to a hand that opens itself has nothing to push against. It can't process an open hand, Harry said slowly. That's the premise. It's built to overcome resistance. It has no function for the absence of resistance. If I stop resisting, if I open my hand and offer the stones instead of protecting them, its entire purpose short circuits because you can't pry open a hand that's already open. It doesn't know how to receive. It only knows how to take, and I'm about to do the one thing in the universe it has no instructions for. I'm going to ask it if it wants them. Wanda's eyes widened. If you open your hand, if you offer the stones, it could simply take them. You would be giving the most dangerous object in creation to a thing with no mind and no mercy. Yeah, Harry said. That's the cost. That's the part Strange warned me about, except it's the opposite of what he thought. He thought I'd be forced to break the rule to win. I'm not. I'm going to win by keeping the rule so completely that I offer my enemy the very thing it came to take. And if it takes them, he met her eyes, then it takes them and the universe gets its wish. And a thing that hands the stones over freely is the one kind of holder the tribunal said it had never seen. I told Strange I'd give the power back before the wanting burned out. I didn't think it would be like this, but it's the same promise. So, he raised the gauntlet and then deliberately, slowly, in full view of the theorem and the city and the woman beside him, he opened his hand, palm up, the 6 stones gleaming, offered. Here, he said to the herald, to the cold geometry, to the immune response of all creation. You came to pry this loose, you don't have to, I'm not going to make you fight for it. If a mortal holding totality is the instability, then let me show you the one thing none of your 14 million futures ever did. Let me open my hand on purpose. Let me ask you what you actually want instead of assuming, the way everyone always assumes, that I'll never let go. The lattice stopped. Across the whole sky of Wakanda, the cold geometry that had been unmaking a city went still, every tendril frozen mid-conclusion, because the theorem had encountered, for the first time in its existence, a value its function could not evaluate, a closed hand that had chosen to open, a resistance that had become a gift, a premise it had been built to assume could not exist, existing, palm up in the light of 6 stones. Offered freely by the one holder in all the futures who had never wanted to keep them. For a long moment, nothing in the universe moved. Harry stood in the frozen sky with his hand open and the 6 stones offered, and the herald hung around him in its arrested geometry, and he could feel it, not thinking it would never think, but recalculating, running and rerunning a function that had hit a value it had no column for. He had told the truth to Wanda. He did not know whether it would take them. He had genuinely offered. That was the whole point. An offer with a secret hope that it would be declined was not an offer. It was a manipulation, and the herald, whatever else it was, could surely tell the difference between a gift and a feint, because feints have a shape and gifts have none. He kept his hand open. He kept the hope out of it. He let the offer be real all the way down, which was the hardest thing he had done since the gauntlet found his hand. Harder than the Titan, harder than death certainty. Because every cell in him wanted to close his fist around the power and protect the women in the streets below. And he held his hand open anyway, palm up, and waited to find out if the universe was about to take everything from him as a reward for finally deserving to keep it. When the herald answered, it did not answer in words, because it had none. It answered in a change of state. The cold geometry began to withdraw. Not to attack, not to accept, to withdraw, tendril by tendril, releasing the city it had been unmaking, letting the towers remember they were towers and the stone remember it was stacked. And as it withdrew, it touched Harry once at the open palm. A single point of contact between the immune response of all creation and the mortal who had offered it the infection it had come to clear. And in that contact Harry understood, as much as a mind could understand a theorem, what had happened inside it. It had been built to resolve an instability. The instability was a hand that held totality and would not open. But the instability was not really the power. The power had always been the same regardless of who held it. The instability was the wanting, the closed fist of a holder who would burn the world before letting go. That was the dangerous thing in every one of the 14 million futures, not the stones but the grip. And Harry had just demonstrated in open sky with a city as his witness and his own dread as the cost, that his grip was not closed. That the hand holding totality was a hand that would open. And an open hand holding infinite power was not an instability the herald needed to clear. It was a configuration it had never modeled and could not classify as a threat, because every threat it knew had one thing in common, the refusal to let go, and this holder had no such refusal in him. So it stood down, not defeated, resolved, its function complete by a path it had not anticipated. The instability it came to clear had cleared itself by being willing to be cleared. The herald gave Harry one last thing before it withdrew entirely, not a gift. It had no concept of gifts, but a transfer, a fragment of its own perception, the briefest glimpse of how the cosmic order had seen him this whole time. He saw himself as the abstract saw him, a tiny warm anomaly, a single point where the iron law of power corrupts had simply failed to apply, a mortal who had been handed the universe and had spent every day handing it back. And he saw that this was why they had all come, death, the tribunal, the herald, not because he was a threat in the ordinary sense, but because he was an exception, and the cosmos does not know what to do with exceptions except test them until they break or prove they won't. He had proven he wouldn't. The sky cleared, the lattice was gone. The city stood, scarred and saved, and 10,000 lives that the herald's arithmetic had marked for deletion went on living, unaware of how close the subtraction had come. Harry closed his hand gently around stones that were his again, or had never stopped being his, or had only ever been his on loan. The distinction felt suddenly less important than it had an hour ago. And then his legs registered the bill, the way they had on the first night, and he sat down hard in the empty air, and Wanda caught him, her red light cradling him before he could fall, and the two of them descended slowly toward a city they had spent the afternoon refusing to let the universe erase. Carol found them first, dropping out of the sky still gold, her evacuation finally finished, her face streaked with the dust of 100 rescues. "It stopped," she said. "I was mid-save and the lattice just stopped. Let go of a building I was pulling a family out of. What did you do?" "He offered it the stones," Wanda said before Harry could downplay it. "He opened his hand in the sky. He gave the Herald the chance to take everything freely with no fight, and it could not take them, because it was built only to take what would not be given, and he gave." Her arm was still around him, holding him up, and she did not move it, and she did not pretend the holding was anything other than what it was. He won the war by losing the argument he spent his whole life refusing to lose. He won by proving he would let go. Carol looked at Harry for a long moment, and the gold banked, and what was underneath it was something he hadn't seen on her before, not the fighter pilot defiance, not the wary respect, but something quieter and more dangerous to both of them. "You offered it everything," she said. "You actually offered it everything, knowing it might take it, knowing you'd have nothing left." "I'd have had you," Harry said, too tired to manage the sentence into something safer. "All of you. The power was always the least of what I had. That's the thing the Herald couldn't compute, and I almost couldn't either, that the stones were never the thing I was afraid to lose." Carol opened her mouth and closed it, and for once in her life had nothing to say, and that silence was its own kind of answer. Gamora and Natasha came up out of the streets together, dust-caked, moving with the bone-deep weariness of people who had spent an afternoon saving lives with skills they'd been built to take them with. Gamora's blades were sheathed. Natasha's hands were empty. And Harry, watching them cross the rubble toward him, understood that something had finished in both of them this afternoon, some long account that had been open for years. "How many?" he asked them. "How many did you get out?" "All of them," Natasha said. "On our section, every one." She said it flatly, the way she said everything, but there was a thing underneath the flatness that Harry had never heard there before, and it took him a moment to recognize it, because it was so foreign to her register. It was peace. "I've spent a long time, Potter. A long time with a ledger that only ever ran one direction. Red and more red, and the certainty that you don't get to balance a thing like mine, that the best you manage is to keep adding black and never look at the total, because the total would break you." She looked at her empty hands. "I looked at the total today while I was moving that crowd. I had a second in the middle of it where I saw what I was doing, using everything they made me into to pull people out instead of put them down, and I thought, this is what it was for, not redemption. I don't believe in redemption, it's too clean for what I am, but use." The terrible skills finally pointed at the terrible problem they were always shaped to fit, just reversed. "I balanced something today, not the whole ledger, but a page, a real page, and I haven't balanced a real page in," her voice did the thing Wanda's voice did, bent and held, "in a long time. You balanced it yourself," Harry said. "I want that on the record, since I'm apparently the universe's most insufferable stickler for who did what. You did that, not me, not the stones. You took the worst thing anyone ever made you into, and you turned it with your own hands into the thing that saved a city. That's not a page I balanced for you, that's a page you wrote." "I know," Natasha said, "that's why it counts." And she almost smiled. The ration thing, her version of it, harder one than any of theirs, and Harry decided that of all the impossible things he'd seen since the gauntlet found his hand, Natasha Romanoff almost smiling in the rubble of a city she'd saved with the skills of an assassin was the one he'd remember longest. They went back to the base as the sun went down over a country they had, for the second time in 3 weeks, declined to let the universe destroy. Stark met them at the door with a face that had given up trying to be ironic. Strange met them with the particular stillness of a man whose fragments of the future had, against every probability he'd calculated, resolved into the one outcome he hadn't dared model. "You didn't break the rule," Strange said. "It wasn't quite a question. I saw the choice coming, I saw it forced. I saw 1,000 versions where you had to reach into a mine to win, and 1,000 more where you let the city die to keep your hands clean. I didn't see the third thing. I didn't see you open your hand." He shook his head slowly. "In 14 million futures, I never once saw a holder open his hand. I'd concluded it wasn't a thing that could happen, that the wanting was structural. That no being who held that much could ever willingly." He stopped. "You've made a liar out of the time stone twice now. First by giving the power back when no one does, and now by being the future I couldn't see. I'm starting to think the reason I couldn't see you is that you were never on the map the rest of them were drawn on. Or you were looking for the wrong move," Harry said. Everyone kept looking for the move where I keep the power and stay good. There isn't one. You were right about that the first day. The wanting does burn out eventually, and what's left isn't a person. So the answer was never how do I hold this and stay myself. The answer was always how do I let go of this before it costs me myself. I just didn't know what letting go would look like until the Herald gave me the shape of it. Turns out letting go isn't a single act, it's a willingness. You don't have to actually drop the power. You just have to be genuinely all the way down, the kind of person who would. And the universe can tell the difference. The Herald could tell. It stood down not because I dropped the stones, but because it finally believed I would. That night, for the first time since the gauntlet found his hand, Harry slept without the stones offering him anything. He noticed it as he was falling asleep, the absence of the whisper, the steady low pressure toward more that had run under every waking moment for 3 weeks, simply gone. Not because the stones had changed, because he had stopped being a thing they could work on. You cannot tempt a man with more when you have proven in open sky that more is the thing he was always willing to give away. The whisper had nothing left to say to him. It had been, all along, an argument that depended on his wanting to keep what he held, and he had settled that argument with the universe as his witness, and now the most dangerous object in several universes lay quiet on his hand, out of things to offer a man who wanted nothing it could give. He slept 10 hours. When he woke, the 4 of them were waiting, not by accident. He could tell it wasn't by accident, there was an arrangement to it, a thing built in one of the rooms he wasn't in, finally ready to be shown to him. Wanda and Carol and Gamora and Natasha in the common room in the morning light with the specific composure of people who have reached a decision together and elected a moment to share it. "Sit down, Potter," Carol said. "We've been talking. In rooms you weren't in like you keep insisting we should. And we've reached some conclusions, and you're going to listen to all of them before you say a single managing word, because if you start administering this, we will all walk out and reconvene without you, and you'll have to wait for the next memo." Harry sat down. "First," Wanda said, "the thing you have been so careful about. The thing you would not name, would not steer, would not let yourself want out loud because you were so afraid of becoming the man who arranges people. We have decided that your carefulness, while correct, has become its own kind of cowardice." Her chin was up. "You have spent 3 weeks making sure none of us felt managed. Good, we did not, but somewhere in all your not managing, you stopped letting yourself be wanted, because being wanted felt too close to the thing you feared. And that is not restraint, sorcerer, that is hiding, and we are done letting you hide behind your own ethics." "Second," Gamora said, "we are not a thing you have. We discussed this, your fear of the gentle prison, the harem the man administers. 4 women kept off balance, so they orbit him. You were right to fear it, so we have built the opposite in the rooms you were not in. We are not 4 women who each separately chose you and now compete for your attention. We are 4 women who chose you and then chose each other and decided together what this will be. It is ours, not yours. You do not get a vote on its shape, only on whether you are in it." The clean directness, the truest thing about her. "We are offering you a place in a thing we built. You may accept or decline. But you may not redesign it, and you may not feel guilty about it, because the guilt is just another way of making it about you, and it is not about you. It is about us choosing freely, the thing none of us was ever allowed to choose before." Third, Natasha said, and this is the part you'll want to argue with, so I'm going to say it plainly so there's nothing to misread. "We know what you are. We know you could have made any of this happen with a thought and didn't. We know the love is real because we checked it ourselves in a cosmic courtroom with death as the dealer, and it came up clean. So you don't have to keep proving you didn't compel us. We're not worried about that anymore. We settled it. What you have to do now, the only thing left, is let it have happened. Like the kindness Carol keeps trying to teach you. Let it have happened. Stop bracing. Stop accounting. Stop waiting for the price to come due. There's no price. We chose you. That's the whole transaction. It already cleared." Fourth, Carol said, and her voice had gone quiet, and the gold was nowhere in it. Just a woman who'd flown across a galaxy on a bad rumor and found something better than she'd feared. "We're not asking you to decide today. We know the war with the abstracts isn't over, not really. There's still the question of what you do with the stones, and the tribunal's still watching, and death still got a standing invitation to your shoulder. We're not asking you to sort the cosmos first. We're just asking you to stop pretending you don't want this, because the pretending is the last lie left in a man who made all the rest of us stop lying. So." She looked at him, and the others looked at him. 4 women who had each been made into a weapon by someone who called it love, standing in the morning light, having decided, freely together, to choose the one man who never once reached for the trigger. "Drop the ledger, Potter, just this once, and tell us the true thing, the one even the Mind Stone is reluctant to look at." Harry looked at the 4 of them, and for once he did not reach for any of the 7 careful, managing, self-protective sentences that his whole life had trained him to deploy. He did not account for the risk. He did not brace for the price. He did the thing they'd asked, the hardest thing, the thing the herald had taught him in the sky and Carol had been teaching him for weeks and the 11-year-old on the cold floor had never imagined he'd get to do. He let it have happened. The true thing, he said, is that I've wanted this since the first night and I've been terrified of it the whole time because every good thing I've ever had came with a price I couldn't see until it was too late, and you four are the best thing I've ever had, which means by my whole life's arithmetic you should come with the worst price of all. And I've been waiting for it, 3 weeks. Waiting for the catch, the hook, the bill, and there isn't one. You built a thing without a hook in it on purpose in rooms I wasn't in, specifically so I couldn't find the catch because you knew I'd look for it. His voice wasn't steady and he let it not be. So yes, I want this, I want all of it. I want the thing you built and I want my place in it and I want to stop bracing and I don't entirely know how, but I'd like to learn if 4 very dangerous women are patient enough to teach a man who's only ever known how to want things he was sure he'd lose. He spread his hands, the human ones empty, offered. There, the true thing, no managing, no ledger, just yes to whatever you built, yes. The morning held its breath. And then Wanda crossed the room. In the gap she had always kept and had at last decided to close for good, and the others followed, and the thing they had built in the rooms he wasn't in finally let him inside it. And for the length of one held morning, a man who could have rewritten the heart of every living thing simply received with empty hands and no accounting. The freely given choice of 4 women who had looked at infinite power and chosen, instead, the one who would never use it on them. The cost of the war had been real. The city bore its scars, the abstracts still watched, the question of the stones remained unanswered, and would have to be answered soon with the whole cosmos as the jury. But that was tomorrow's problem, and Harry Potter had finally, after a lifetime of bracing, learned to let tomorrow's problems wait until tomorrow. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The Omni and the Chosen. The question that had been waiting under everything finally came due on a clear morning a week after the war, and it came due in the form of a third summons that was not, this time, a summons at all, but an invitation. Harry felt the difference immediately. Death's summons had taken him. The tribunals had compelled him, this one asked. A door opened in the air of the terrace politely with a kind of cosmic knock, and on the other side of it was the floorless dark of the High Court. And standing in the doorway rather than dragging him through it was Death herself, robed in absence, warm as she'd been in the worst moment of the trial, but different now. The way a thing is different once it has decided to respect you. The court would speak with you, she said. Not to test, not to judge, to settle a thing that has been left unsettled, which the tribunal finds intolerable, because it is the tribunal's nature to settle things. A pause. You may bring your heart if you wish, they are by now part of the question. So all 5 of them went again, but this time as guests, and the courtroom that had twice been a place of judgment received them this third time as something closer to a council. The matter is the SDONES, said the living tribunal, and the architecture of its voice had lost none of its weight but something of its threat. Immortal holds totality. The tribunal has ruled this permitted provisionally. But provisional is not a state the universe can sustain indefinitely. The SDONES in one hand remain an instability, even an open hand. The question must be resolved. The tribunal convenes to ask the holder what he intends, and to hear it and to weigh it not as prosecution but as counsel. You're asking what I'm going to do with them, Harry said. Good, I've been wanting someone to ask because I've made a decision and I'd rather make it with the whole cosmos as my witness than in private where I could pretend it cost me nothing. He stepped forward into the center of the floorless dark, the gauntlet on his hand. Here's what I've worked out over a week of not sleeping as much as I should. Natasha will confirm I broke my own rule about that twice and noted both exceptions. The problem was never that the stones are powerful. The problem is the configuration. 6 stones, 1 will, that's the instability. Every prior holder kept that configuration because every prior holder wanted the power, and the wanting is the thing that turns the configuration into a catastrophe. So the answer isn't to find a trustworthy holder. There's no such thing. Trustworthiness erodes, that's what the herald was for, to clear away the holders after the erosion. The answer is to end the configuration. You propose to destroy the SDONES, said the tribunal. Others have tried. The SDONES do not destroy. They are load-bearing. The universe requires them. Number, I'm not going to destroy them. I'm not arrogant enough to think the universe would survive me improving it that much. That's the exact mistake Thanos made, deciding he understood the load-bearing structure well enough to cut into it. Harry raised the gauntlet, and the 6 stones threw their colors across the council. I'm going to put them back, all 6. Into the universe, into the places they're meant to occupy, scattered, separate, each one doing the cosmic work it was always meant to do. And I'm going to do it in a way that makes the configuration I'm holding right now impossible to ever assemble again. Not by hiding them. Hidden things get found, that's the whole plot of every story, by binding them. Each stone returned to its function, with a single condition woven into the binding, that they can never again be gathered into one hand against the will of the beings they'd be used upon. Make the gauntlet's whole grammar require consent. Build the rule into the stones themselves so that no future holder can do what every past holder did, because the power will simply refuse to compel. I can't make myself trustworthy forever, but I can make the stones safe forever. I can spend the last use of totality on ensuring there's never a first use of it again. The court was silent. It was eternity who spoke, and eternity had not spoken before. The star-filled silhouette, the contents of all that is, and its voice was the sound a galaxy would make if a galaxy could sigh. You would give up omnipotence, it said, and spend your final ACT of it, ensuring no one may ever hold it again. You understand that this includes you, that you will not be able to reclaim it, that you will be afterward merely powerful, a wizard, a man, a thing that can die. After holding all that is, you would choose to be small again. I never stopped being small, Harry said. That's the thing I figured out somewhere between the Titan and the Herald. I held all the power there is, and I stayed a man who lost a Quidditch match at 13 and grew up in a cupboard and made one rule on a cold floor. The power was never me. It was just a thing I was carrying. And you don't get to keep carrying the universe forever. Eventually you have to set it down, or it crushes you, or worse, you forget you're carrying it and mistake its weight for your own size. He looked around the council. So yes, I'll be small again, gladly, because small is where the people are. Small is where she is. A glance at Wanda, and she is, and she is, and she is. Big was always lonely. I told Death that in the trial. The view from the top is empty. I'd rather have the view from the middle of a thing 4 women built in rooms I wasn't in. That's not a sacrifice. That's the trade I'd make 1,000 times. Infinity for a morning with no managing in it. It's not even close. Death laughed. It was the first time any of them had heard her laugh, and it was not a terrible sound, it was a delighted one. The laugh of an ancient thing that has been surprised, which is the rarest gift you can give a being old enough to have seen everything. Oh, little wizard, she said, do you understand what you've done? You came here 3 times. The first time I tried to convict you. The second time I tried to break you. And both times you defeated me by being a thing I had never catalogued. A mortal who would not take. And now you stand in the high court of all that is, holding the power to be a god forever, and you announce that you're going to use your last omnipotent act to make godhood impossible and then go home and be a man. The warmth in her voice was entirely genuine now, entirely without hunger. Do you know how many beings have held what you hold? Do you know how many gave it back? You'd be the first. Not the first to lose it, the first to return it deliberately with full knowledge, choosing smallness over divinity because smallness has the people in it. She inclined her head. I withdraw every objection I ever raised. I came to you as your executioner. I find I would rather be your witness. There is no death in what you're doing. There's only a man setting down a weight too large for any shoulder, and choosing the weight of love instead, which is the only weight worth carrying, and the only one I have never been able to collect on. The tribunal CONCURS, said the tribunal, and its 3 faces turned in unison toward Harry, and the turning was not judgment now, but something almost like benediction. The holder proposes to resolve the instability by ending the possibility of its recurrence. This is permitted. This is more than permitted. In the long accounting of the tribunal, it is the first wise thing a holder of totality has ever proposed. Proceed, mortal, and know that when it is done you will have the thanks of a court that does not thank, and the watchful respect of powers that do not respect, and the standing invitation of death herself, not as your executioner, but as a friend who will come, when your small mortal life is full and finished, gently and in her own good time. Harry turned to the 4 women. I have to ask you, he said, because I don't do things to people that affect them without asking, and this affects you. When I put the stones back, when I make myself small again, I won't be able to protect you the way I can now. No more folding titans into gardens. No more rebuilding cities by hand. I'll be a wizard, a good one, but a wizard, mortal, fallible, able to lose. The thing you chose me at the height of the most powerful being in several universes, that thing is about to stop existing. You'd be choosing a man instead of a god. So I'm asking, before I do it in front of the whole court, with no power left to influence the answer once it's done, knowing that I'm about to become small, do you still? Yes, said Carol before he finished. Yes, said Gamora. We chose you the day you put the gauntlet down to ask us questions, said Natasha. Not the day you picked it up. We were never choosing the god Potter. We were choosing the man who kept refusing to be one. Make yourself small. You'll just be more of the thing we already wanted. You are asking, Wanda said, and she stepped forward into the center of the floorless dark beside him, where the air had once bent toward her and now simply held her, a woman and not a weapon, whether we love the power. After everything, after 3 trials and a titan and a war, you still, sorcerer. She shook her head, and the not smile was on her face, fully arrived at last. We have spent our whole lives being wanted for our power. Gamora's blades, Carol's fire, my chaos, Natasha's skills. Every one of us was chosen before for the weapon she could be. And you are the first person who ever made us suspect we might be wanted for the choice underneath the weapon. So number, we do not love your power. We have been loved for power, all of us, and it is the loneliest thing in the universe, as you would know, having held more of it than anyone. Put it down, be small. Be a man who can die. We will love that man freely, the way we have loved him since the first night, and we will keep telling him no and asking him questions and building things in rooms he is not in until our own small mortal lives are full and finished and death comes for us gently in her own good time. She took his hand, the one that wore the gauntlet, the human hand under the golden thing. Now set it down. We are ready to have you small. We have been ready for some time. You are the last to know, which is, I think, the most consistent thing about you. And Harry Potter, in the high court of all that is, with death as his witness and the tribunal as his counsel and 4 women who had chosen the man over the god holding him steady, raised the Infinity Gauntlet one last time, and did the thing no holder of totality had ever done. He gave it back. He did it the hard way, of course, because he did everything the hard way on purpose. Not a single snap that would have scattered the stones in an instant, but 6 separate acts of return, each one a small surgery, each one a choice made fully and felt completely. The Power Stone he returned to the deep places where raw force belongs and bound it so it could never again be wielded against an unwilling will. The Space Stone he folded back into the structure of distance itself with the same binding. The Reality Stone he wove back into the fabric of what is, the Time Stone into the River of When, the Soul Stone into the long catalogue of the living and the gone, and each one, as he set it down, took a little of the godhood with it, so that with every return Harry felt himself growing smaller, lighter, more mortal, the second heartbeat made of every heartbeat fading back into a single ordinary pulse that was only his own. The Mind Stone he returned last, and to it he gave the binding that mattered most, the one that would make the whole configuration impossible, the rule woven into the deepest grammar of the stones, so that never again in any future the Time Stone could see or couldn't, would the 6 be gatherable into one hand for the purpose of compelling a single unwilling soul. He spent the last of his omnipotence making sure no one would ever have it the way he'd had it. It was, he thought, as the final stone left his hand and the gauntlet itself dissolved into the ordinary air, exactly the right thing to spend it on, the one use of infinite power that left the universe freer than it found it. And then it was done, and Harry Potter stood in the high court of all that is, a wizard, a man, a thing that could die, holding the hand of a woman who had chosen him, with 3 more at his back who had chosen him too, and he had never in his life felt less powerful or more himself. The court folded them home one last time, and the terrace received them, the same terrace where Carol had found him on the second night, where Wanda had closed the gap for 3 seconds and then again for good, where a man who'd held the universe had done most of his learning about how to set it down. The Wakandan evening was ordinary. The sky held no lattice, no fold, no abstract turning its attention toward the small warm spot on the map. The map, for the first time in 3 weeks, had stopped being a place the cosmos was watching with intent to intervene. Harry flexed his hand. It was just a hand now. No gauntlet, no second heartbeat, no whisper running always toward more. He'd expected to feel the absence as a loss, 3 weeks of carrying infinity and now nothing, and instead what he felt was the specific lightness of a man who has finally put down a rucksack he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it had a weight. "How do you feel?" Wanda asked. She was watching him the way she watched everything sidelong present, but the surveillance had gone out of it. She was looking now, not auditing. "Light," Harry said. "Mortal, a little terrified," which is correct, because mortal things should be a little terrified. It's how you know you've got something to lose. He turned his hand over the empty palm. "I keep reaching for it, the power. Some part of me keeps expecting the stones to answer when I want something. They don't. It's like a phantom limb, except the limb was omnipotence, which I imagine makes me a very annoying patient." He let the hand fall. "But under the phantom thing, I feel like myself, more than I have in weeks." The gauntlet was always arguing with me in my own voice, and I'm only now realizing how loud it was because the quiet is enormous. I can hear myself think. I'd forgotten what my actual thoughts sounded like without Infinity editorializing in the margins. Stark and Strange were waiting inside, and the 2 of them had the look of men who'd watched the impossible resolve in a direction they hadn't dared hope for. Stark characteristically recovered first. "So you just gave it back." "The most powerful object in the history of objects. You put it down and walked away and made it so nobody can ever pick it up the same way again." He shook his head. "I've spent my whole life trying to build a suit of armor around the world. I never once thought the answer might be to take the armor off. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while, Potter. That's going to be rattling around in here for years. It's the only thing I actually did right, Harry said. Everything else was just refusing to do the wrong things, which is easy to make look heroic but is mostly just standing still very hard. The giving it back was the one move. And I only found it because 4 people kept telling me no until I ran out of ways to keep it. Strange regarded him with the wary, settled respect of a man whose entire discipline had been rewritten in 3 weeks. The time stone's back where it belongs, he said. I can feel it, distant now, doing its work in the river of when, no longer mine to wield, which is correct. It was never meant to be a single sorcerer's tool, and the binding holds, I've looked. Whatever you wove into the stones at the end, the consent grammar, the rule made structural, it holds across every future I can still dimly see. No one gathers them again for compulsion, not in any timeline. You didn't just give up the power. You closed the door behind you and locked it and made the lock out of the last of the power itself. He almost smiled, which from Strange was an event. I told you the first day that I'd seen 14 million futures and they all ended badly. I owe you an apology. I'd only seen the futures of men who wanted to keep it. You were never in that set. I'm glad I lived to see the set you were in. That night the base emptied of its crisis energy for the first time since Harry had arrived in it, and the people who had spent 3 weeks bracing for the next cosmic intervention found themselves, abruptly, with the strange luxury of an ordinary evening, and none of them quite knew what to do with it. Which is the way of people who have been at war. Peace arrives and they stand in it blinking, holding tools they no longer need. It was Gamora who found Harry on the terrace again, later, when the others had drifted toward sleep or toward the quiet work of decompression. She did not keep the careful distance, she had retired it weeks ago. She stood beside him at the rail, and for a while neither of them spoke, 2 people who'd been made into weapons learning slowly, the language of a silence that wasn't a threat. I have been thinking about what I am, she said eventually. You refused 3 weeks ago to look into the soul stone and tell me whether I was a woman or a memory. And now you cannot look. The stone is gone, returned to the river of souls. So the question can never be answered from the outside now. Not by you, not by anyone. It is permanently mine. She turned the idea over with her customary precision. I thought when you put the stones back that I would feel the loss of it, the possibility of an answer gone forever. Instead I feel free. The question is mine now in a way it could never have been while the means to answer it existed. I will live as a woman and decide that the living counts exactly as you said, and there is no longer any rock in the universe that could overrule me. You did that not by answering the question, by destroying the thing that could have. You did it, Harry said. I just declined to take it from you. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference, and I'm going to keep insisting on it for the rest of my mortal life, so you may as well get used to it. I am used to it, Gamora said. It is the most reliable thing about you. The insistence that the good things people are, they are on their own. She looked at him, and the green of her, built for blades and not for softness, did the enormous work of softening anyway. I have decided what I am, sorcerer. I am a woman who was given back her own reality by a man who kept no copy, and I am a woman who has chosen freely to stand beside that man in the thing the 4 of us built. That is what I am. It is not a memory's answer. Memories do not choose, I choose, and I choose this. She closed the small remaining distance on her own terms in her own time, and what passed between them then was hers to initiate and hers to end, and Harry let it be exactly the thing she'd decided it would be, which was the whole point, which had always been the whole point. The thing the 4 women had built did not look like the thing the old stories would have called a harem, because the old stories were written by men who imagined such a thing as a collection. Women gathered around a powerful man like trophies around a shelf, each one diminished into a fraction of his attention, each one quietly competing for the scarce resource of his regard. What Wanda and Carol and Gamora and Natasha had built in the rooms Harry wasn't in was the opposite of a collection. It was a confederation. 4 women who had each, separately, been made into a weapon by someone who called it love, and who had found in each other, before they had fully found it in him, the rare relief of being understood by people who knew the exact shape of that particular wound. They had chosen Harry, yes, but first and more importantly they had chosen each other, and the thing they offered him a place in was a thing that would have survived without him, which was precisely what made it safe to offer. That's the part you never could have engineered, Carol told him on the terrace the night it all settled. If you'd built this, if you gathered us, arranged us, made yourself the center, it would have been the gentle prison Gamora warned you about. 4 women orbiting one man, each a little insecure, each a little managed. But you didn't build it. You couldn't even watch it being built. We locked you out of the rooms. So what you got in the end isn't 4 women who revolve around you. It's a thing that revolves around itself and decided to let you in. You're not the sun, wizard. You're a planet that got invited into a system that was already turning. And honestly, that's a much better deal than being the sun. Suns are alone, suns burn, planets get to have weather and seasons and company. She bumped his shoulder on her own terms, brief. You spent 3 weeks terrified of becoming a man who collects people. You should have been less terrified. You're not the collector, you're the collected. We picked you, try to enjoy it. I'm working on it, Harry said. The enjoying. It turns out to be a skill like everything else, and I'm a beginner, and I have 4 extremely patient and occasionally terrifying teachers. We're not patient, Natasha said from the doorway where she'd been standing for some unmeasurable amount of time in her customary way. We're strategic. There's a difference. Patience is waiting. Strategy is waiting because waiting wins. She came out onto the terrace, and the 4 of them were together then in the evening with the man they'd chosen. And the thing between the 5 of them had the settled, unforced quality of a structure that has finally found its load paths, each weight distributed, nothing straining, the whole thing standing on its own because it had been built to. For the record, Potter, the daily question, did you change anyone's mind today? I can't, Harry said. I gave the power back. I couldn't change a mind now if I wanted to. I'm just a wizard. I know, Natasha said. I'm going to keep asking anyway, every day, out loud. Why, I don't have the power anymore. The question's moot. It's not moot. Natasha's green eyes were clear and cert. The power was never the point of the question, Potter. The question was never really, did you compel anyone? It was, are you still the kind of person who'd refuse to? And that question never expires, power or no power. A man can violate a will with a word as easily as with a stone if he's the kind of man who'd do it. You're not. But the only way I know you're not is to keep asking and to keep watching your face when you answer until one of us is dead. She almost smiled. So I'll keep asking. It's not surveillance anymore. It's just how I say good morning to a man I trust, which is a thing I say to almost no one and never lightly and never twice to the same person unless he keeps earning it. Then keep asking, Harry said. Every day, out loud, I'll keep answering. It's the best good morning I've ever been offered. The 4 of them stayed on the terrace late into the night, and what happened after the talking, the slow turn from conversation toward closeness, the easy gravity of people who have chosen each other and have finally stopped bracing against the choosing, was theirs, and it was warm, and it was free, and it belonged to no one's account but their own. There was no managing in it. There was no ledger. There was a man who had held the universe and given it back, and 4 women who had been wanted for their power their whole lives, and had finally found someone who wanted the choice underneath the weapon. And what they built together that night and the nights after was the one thing in all of creation that even the Gauntlet could never have manufactured. A thing freely given by people who could have walked away. Who didn't, who chose and chose and chose again every morning out loud. The door between universes stayed sealed. Voldemort in his small dark wood in a world that was no longer Harry. Felt the old scar ache one final time and then slowly go quiet, the path between worlds salted shut, the opportunity he'd glimpsed closed forever. The Dark Lord returned to his actual size, which was the size of a frightening man in a single country, a problem for a world that would have to solve him itself, as worlds must. Harry did not think about him often. There was, he found, very little room in a full life for the terrors of an empty one. And in the cold registry, which was not so cold anymore, death kept her standing invitation and watched the small warm spot on the map with something she had not felt for a mortal in the long catalogue of her work, which was fondness without hunger, the patient, unpossessive fondness of a friend who knows she will be welcome when she finally comes, and who is, for once, in no hurry to come at all. She had conceded the point. A mortal had made death negotiable in his single case. Not by cheating her, but by asking first, by living so fully and so freely that when his small mortal life was finally full and finished, his ending would be not a defeat she collected, but a completion she attended, gently in her own good time, as a guest at the end of a life well spent rather than a creditor calling in a debt. It was, she reflected, the strangest arrangement she had ever entered into with a living thing. It was also, she suspected, the closest thing to peace she had felt since before there were stars. Harry Potter lived a long time after that, as wizards do, and he lived it small. A man, mortal, fallible, able to lose, holding no power greater than the considerable but finite magic he'd carried in with him through a curtain that no longer existed. He never again held a stone. He never again rewrote a reality or reversed a death or reached toward a mind that hadn't invited him. He had spent his one chance at omnipotence ensuring no one would ever have it, and he never once regretted the spending, because the thing he'd bought with it was the thing he'd told a cosmic court he wanted. A morning with no managing in it, and then another, and another, stretching out across a long mortal life full of company and weather and seasons and the freely given choice of 4 women who kept telling him no, and asking him questions and building things in rooms he was not in, and loving him not for the god he'd briefly been, but for the man who had refused, every single day, out loud, to stay one. He had picked up the totality of creation and used it of all the impossible things to mind his manners. And then he had set it down and gone home and minded them for the rest of his life, which was, in the end, the only kind of God he had ever been willing to be. The kind that asks. The kind that, having been given everything, chose to be given a life instead. Years later, and there were a great many years, full ones, the kind that accumulate into a life rather than a legend. A young woman who had been born into the Confederation Harry had been invited to join asked him the question that every child of that strange and happy house eventually asked, because the story was simply too large not to ask about. Is it true, she said, that you held the whole universe once, all of it, and gave it back? They were in a garden, a real one, planted by human hands, weeded by them too, imperfect and alive, and nothing like the sterile paradise he'd once folded a titan into. Harry was older now, gray coming in at the temples, his magic still considerable and entirely finite, a wizard and a man and a thing that would, in some far-off and unhurried season, die. He set down the trowel. It's true, he said, for about 3 weeks, a long time ago in a place that doesn't quite exist anymore. Why'd you give it back? The girl's face was open with the particular outrage of the young at the squandering of advantage. You could have kept it. You could have fixed everything. You could have made everyone happy, Harry finished. Yeah, I could have. That was always the temptation, not the cruel version, the kind one. Reach into everyone and smooth out the parts that hurt and never ask, because asking is slow and the suffering is right there. He brushed soil from his hands. Here's the thing I learned, and it's the only thing I really know, so listen even though it sounds like an answer adults give to avoid the real one. The happiness you reach in and install isn't happiness. It's taxidermy. It looks like the thing from across the room and it's hollow when you hold it. The only happiness worth anything is the kind a person chooses, which means it's the kind they could have not chosen, which means it comes with the risk that they'll choose otherwise. And you can't have the one without the other. A love that can't leave isn't love. A joy that can't be refused isn't joy. A choice that can't go the other way isn't a choice at all. It's just a very convincing puppet. He looked at her and he made the next part gentle because it was the most important part. So I gave it back, because I'd rather live in a world full of people who might say no than rule a world full of people who can't. The first one's frightening and the second one's lonely, and I'd had enough of lonely. I wanted the frightening one. I wanted the one with you in it, choosing your own things, including the things I'd rather you didn't. That world's the only one worth living in. It just costs more because you have to ask for everything, and sometimes the answer's number. The girl considered this with the seriousness of the young, which is the deepest seriousness there is. That's a weird reason to give up being a god, she decided. It's the only good one, Harry said. Every other reason for giving up power is a lie people tell to feel humble. The real reason is just that power's the loneliest thing there is, and I'd found something better, and you don't trade the better thing for the bigger one unless you've never had the better thing and don't know what you're missing. He picked the trowel back up. Now, are you going to help me with these tomatoes, or are you going to stand there interrogating a retired god about his life choices? Because the tomatoes won't plant themselves, and I gave back the only thing that could have planted them for me, and frankly, I've never been happier about a decision. She helped him with the tomatoes. And somewhere in the house behind them, the Confederation went on turning, Wanda reading something by a window, the red light quiet in her hands now, used for small kindnesses and nothing larger, Carol back from somewhere far and bright, trailing the last of an atmosphere, complaining cheerfully about the structural inadequacy of the garden fence, Gamora teaching a child the careful economy of a kitchen knife, which was the only kind of blade work she did anymore, and the only kind she'd ever wanted to. Natasha in a chair with her back to a wall and a book she was actually reading, her ledger finally, after a long life of black, balanced enough to set down. 4 women who had been wanted, their whole lives, for the weapons they could be, and who had built in rooms a man was not invited into, and then invited him into anyway, a thing that wanted them for the choice underneath the weapon. They had each said yes freely decades ago, and they had said it again every morning since out loud, because a yes said only once is a thing you can wonder about, and a yes said every morning is a thing you can stand on. The man they'd chosen knelt in a garden he planted with his own finite hands, teaching a child to plant tomatoes, holding no power greater than the love he'd been given, and the magic he'd carried in through a curtain that no longer existed, and he was, by every measure that had ever mattered to him, the most fortunate being in any universe, not because he had once held everything, but because he had set everything down, and found in the space where infinity had been, a life. Death would come for him eventually, gently in her own good time, as a friend arriving at the end of a long and welcome visit, but not for a great while yet. There were tomatoes to plant and questions to answer and mornings, a great many mornings, each one beginning with a woman asking out loud whether he was still the kind of man who would never reach into another soul and take what wasn't given, and each one answered truthfully with the only word that had ever mattered. Number he hadn't, he never would. He was just a man in a garden who had once been a god, and had given it back, and had never once looked over his shoulder at what he'd set down, because everything he'd ever actually wanted was right there in front of him, planting tomatoes, asking weird questions, choosing him freely in a world where no could always have been the answer, and yes, against all the odds of a life that had started in a cupboard, kept being it. Chapter 7 End.